We're all ready to go. Go you. Order. My wife says that all the time at home. Listen to me. Right, welcome to the workshop today, which is the workshop. I do have one apology. Jeffrey Young is not here. I don't see John, but I haven't quite heard him. Anyway, it's not here, so we need to mover and seconder for that. Move it. Okay, second it. Okay, all in favour, say aye. Aye. It's carried. Right. That's been done. Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let Lucy carry on with this.
Kia ora, everybody. So today we've got a few chunky things to run through with you. The purpose of the workshop is to update you primarily on Kanoa work from the last quarter, and also to talk about our forward work program and what the next period looks like. We've got a section as well to talk to you about learning from the land and give you an update on where that is at. So we've got a fair amount of bits to get through. So I'm going to do a quick intro. Are we sharing the screen? Oh yeah, perfect. So I'll just talk through the agenda. But if you just go on to the next one, Mick, for me, please, the scene setting stuff. So I thought it was useful just to kind of ground us back to some of the matters that we are grappling with in my group. It's fair to say we're managing our river catchments across three kind of different speeds of work. We have our day-to-day operations, our big co-funded projects, Kanoa work, and also our long-term transformation pieces. So that's the strategy space and also some of our system improvement pieces. So I wanted to start with the scene setting and just to kind of, I guess, ground us in what we're going to be talking about primarily today, and just identify some of the risks that we are traversing and associated with the way that we work and how we have been working. So historically, the work programs across these kind of three different paces, cadences or speeds, hasn't been particularly well aligned. And so some of that has caused some duplications, some missed opportunities, some potential inefficiencies, and ultimately some confusion in the community about how all of these pieces kind of layer up. So at the last workshop, we talked on, it was back on the 5th of March, and honestly, I don't know where the year is going, but back at the beginning of March, we talked about how we were going to continue to implement and develop our integrated catchment management approach. And we talked in quite a lot of detail about what that would entail and how we would do that forwards with your refreshed direction around the importance of it. So that conversation is a long-term transformational system shift conversation that connects obviously across the organisation to both policy, our land use changes, possible governance arrangements, deep and sustained community engagement that continues to be really important. And whilst that work is continuing at pace, as I said, given that you are very clear about how important it is a slightly longer burn than some of the other pieces of work that we have on the group. So today we've got some time to talk about that, and we will primarily though be focused on those other cadences. So the big co-funded projects, so the Kanoa work, and then Tim Connell and Dave Adamson are going to be here after we talk Kanoa to talk about the work of the technical and delivery teams in our kind of day-to-day BAU. What does our short and medium speed work look like? So yeah, that's the plan for what we're going to run through today. And I don't want to do lots of talking because it's not my gig. But we've got the wonderful Michelle Powell to talk to us about where we are at with Kanoa, and we've got some maps and whatnot to talk you through as well. So hopefully that meets everybody's needs. And with that, I can just be quiet and hand over and introduce Michelle to come up and talk to us about the flood resilience program that we've been doing with Kanoa.
Well spotted. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me again at this forum. It's a pleasure. Okay, Lucy, you're driving?
Yes.
Thank you. Look, I'd like to just give an overview again of the flood resilience program. Some of this you'll be quite familiar, so it's just going to be a glance, but I do want to highlight that the format of this slide deck is actually very helpfully with our comms team. Carrie-Anne and Adrian is in the format of what we call our resilient rivers and how Kanoa likes to platform and talk from it. So hence the format of it. We'll just quickly go over any introductions and acknowledgements. We'll go over the program context and update. We'll then dive into some of the project updates, some next steps, and then some questions. But happy to take questions along the way. There's a few important areas that we'll cover that you'll be interested to hear about how it's affecting the program. The Regional Infrastructure Fund, you'll all be well familiar with this, but it is a government funding. It's a stable strand of government funding. Kanoa administer it on behalf of MB, and obviously our contractual relationship is through Kanoa. It's delivered locally through separate investment rounds. Environment Southland has a tranche 1 and a tranche 2, which is a Kanoa term. Funding agreements are 60% and 40% split. Tranche 1 was traditionally grant-funded agreements. Tranche 2 has started moving into suspensory loan, which we've covered in previous council updates. Next slide, please. Tranche 1, this is just a quick glance. It's $6 million. Upper Rima has been completed in September 24. Te Anau Basin is tracking along really well. We're due to complete that work in June 2026. We'll be slightly ahead of schedule. And Aridi is making progress. It's well underway, and I can talk a little bit more about its programming and prioritisation. Next slide, please. The key things that I do want to highlight on some of these slides, the terminology and the language is now really aligned with resilient rivers and how Kanoa talks to it. And we've been able to tidy up a little bit of the misnomers around the Gore River and things throughout this, which unfortunately Kanoa picked up. So this is really how we front face the description of these projects. Upper Rima, it was really successful, strengthening flood banks and stabilising stream edges. Next slide, please. Te Anau, it's a large-scale project which is improving the channel capacity and remediating some of the flood bank to just help bring it up to speed and help it be a little bit more resilient. It did kick off in 2024. It's had a little bit of weather impact, but great contractors on the ground who've been able to sort of mitigate and keep the program on track. As I said, it'll be finishing up sort of towards the end of May, June. Ariti floodplain project. Again, it kicked off in 2024. We had an extension, which I raised earlier in the year. We now have a revised practical completion date of 31st of March 2028. That was to take into account a bit of a lag to get going, some wet weather, the October event of last year. We're working through asset condition, identified defects, and bringing basically the level of service up to what it should be, which is kind of a fit for purpose state and helping provide a consistent resilience, if you like, across the Ariti floodplain. Tranche 2. Got a couple of things to talk about in Tranche 2. This program has started this year. It goes to 2031. It is a suspensory loan agreement. It has there's three sub-projects in the Mataura project, which will have some technical validation. work which goes across the Aridi and the Mataura in the Otapuni elements. The suspensory loan still has not been signed by Kanoa. I am told it's imminent, month to month. Look, I don't think there's anything we need to be concerned about from a transactional perspective. I think with as it was explained to me by Kanoa last week, the larger programs of work are taking quite a while to move through their CE processes and get it signed. So look, I'm hopeful that we'll actually get that before the end of April. That's sort of been the assurance on that. Next slide, please. The Invercargill and Aridi flood resilience project. It is 6.85 million. 2.85 relates to the Otapuni Invercargill works, and then the other 4 million continues the Aridi floodplains work. For the Aridi, it continues basically the resilience strengthening of the network. We're currently going through a prioritisation exercise. As far as tranche 2 goes, what I would say is the Aridi floodplain is probably moving right on track because it has a relationship with tranche 1 Aridi floodplain. So the prioritisation work we're doing for tranche 1 works is actually intertwined with tranche 2. So we have a pretty good ability here to be able to look at which areas and packages of work will marry nicely and have some good consistency across that network. Next slide, please. Mataura.
We skip one mix, sorry. There's an Otapuni one. Oh, yeah, that one there.
The Otapuni, thank you. It kicks off in 2026 as well. We have some discussions which will be led with Lucy and Tim tomorrow at ICC to talk about a few flood modelling updates and also what the Otapuni at a high level means. It has two stages to it. One is to look at the low sections which have been known for some time along the Otapuni flood bank. The second stage of it is to really look at a piece of work on how we actually marry the hydraulic modelling capacity of that stream into the recent work at Waikiwi. So there'll be 2 phases to that. And there's some work happening with staff now and Tim's team to sort of gather the previous investigations around the low areas of those flood banks. We'll be looking to get that going later this year and shore that up. But it's due to finish around 2028. Again, it has a technical validation piece, which is sort of the next 4 to 6 months to just really finalise what those 2 stages of work are.
And is it all right if I jump in just for a second?
Yes.
I'll just add to the point about the discussions with Invercargill City Council. So tomorrow they've got one of their first long-term plan workshops. The topic is resilience. They asked and invited us. They're going to be having it over at our Southland building. They have asked for an update from us in terms of the flood modelling, but also they're interested in this piece of work that we're doing. We are at a staff level engaging and have been for a couple of weeks now in terms of what it could look like, and following their submission on the bylaw as well. They've got some interest further up the Otapuni, which extends beyond the picture of the scope that we'd tabled with Kanoa. So between Tim and myself and David Adamson, we've been talking with their teams about how we could get further benefit from a broader scope of work if we were doing it in partnership with the City Council. So those conversations are in fairly early stages, but the Kanoa work, as we've said, gives us an opportunity to thinking and fast track some of these things that otherwise we wouldn't have had an opportunity to do. So just thought that was useful flavour, but we will obviously be back talking to you about that in more detail following the workshop tomorrow. So thanks, Michelle.
Thank you. The Mataura River flood resilience project. This is a very, very large project for Southland, one of the largest across New Zealand actually in terms of the tranche 2 funding. It's an important project in the sense that it will enable Southland to develop a blueprint for the Matara, which will be linking the slow to flow work, looking at how it relates to the infrastructure, and also looking at improvements with the system performance around Gora Matara. We have we have a 5-year timeframe for Matara. It's broken into 3 projects, which I've touched on earlier. The first project is the technical validation piece, and it allows for Southland to develop that blueprint, also produce what the criticality priority areas are to commence early works and continue that as we target major works in probably years 3, 4 and 5. I think this project has an important relationship with your long-term planning, infrastructure strategy and your forward works program, and probably also a really good chance for all the communities and stakeholders to understand what their environment looks like with Matara and Upper Matara. The resilient work will be kicking off late April, early May. It will involve basically doing a gap analysis and a review of all the technical information that has been done to date, which is updated flood modelling. We've done a little bit of geotech work, and what we'll be doing is coming up with a scoping brief out of that will incorporate workshops and also starting to develop what a blueprint looks like. There's a very good time frame to do that. It's kind of the next 9 to 12 months, and I think it'll be quite an interesting process with those communities. The early works that we have related to this, which is on the next slide, is the channel widening works. This was identified, I've mentioned this a few times, it was identified through operations, Dave Connor's team, that this would have a significant improvement with the flow off the river. We did some modelling around that and realised that it actually had some decent hydraulic improvements with the river and getting it back to sort of its channel capacity. So it comes under the Kanoa project. We received the consent late March. Contract was awarded and signed by both parties in the last few weeks. The program around enabling this to stand up and get diggers on site has been on track in terms of how we'd scheduled it. We have the site walkover with all parties planned for Monday, and then we'll be mobilising equipment later next week as well. We do have a ministerial visit. Thank you, Rob. For around the 8th of May, which is actually really good time before we actually get in and start having a sort of a heavy constructed shutdown area. And that will be a really great chance to sort of kick off the Matara project. So that's looking really well. What I do want to say about this is we're in a non-traditional kind of weather window to carry out these sorts of works. However, through the contract, we've got pretty good mitigation, 35 days allowed for wet weather and interruption. We've been working quite closely with the contractor and related parties to ensure that the processes and the compliance with getting this right is indeed right. And I think from my perspective, being an interim program manager, I've really wanted to ensure that no stone is not uncovered in terms of making sure that we have the relevant permits from NZTA, Kiwi Rail, landowners, and we're doing all the right things to meet the compliance. That has really driven when we physically start. So happy to take any more questions around that.
Just got a quick question then. Yeah. Were we limited to what we could take out of there, or is that the maximum we could? Because there's more, you got more area could have been taken out.
I think,
and just trying to understand why we've got the lines where we did.
Yeah, thank you. Great question, Councillor Jeremy. Those areas were really the areas that the modelling showed having a benefit without causing an adverse effect. So I think if you go in and do kind of an aggressive removal, it can potentially have some adverse effects, right? So we've still got some work to consider on the true left and the true right, but I think this was the balance of the right approach where we're at in this program.
So the modelling, when you're doing the modelling, you might have gone as far as you could, and then be showing that the effects, or we saw the end product, so to speak.
Yes.
I'm just understanding, because there is certainly plenty of area there, but I'm just trying to get why we've come to where we did. And if we're doing something, we want to make sure we do it right and get the flow capacity.
Yeah, and I think this is really what I call a first pass at what we're doing in the channel. A lot of this technical validation will continue to look at, do we do further channel widening works with a combination of looking at our flood banks. You know, it doesn't seem like it, but it has an intricate effect downstream and upstream. So I think from a modelling perspective and the design of these areas, this was seen as probably having a reasonable and stabilising impact without not fully understanding what it might do downstream. But it will absolutely provide a benefit.
I'll jump in as well. So
Yes.
from the modelling that we've done, probably I think it was last year, but it might have been 2024. That informed the areas in terms of where we had the most build up and the capacity constraints that were being flagged as causing a problem through that pinch point beyond the bridges. And so those models and the scenarios that were then run in the finalisation of the design confirmed that we could get significant benefit from a hydrological efficiency by taking it, you know, by addressing those pieces that are highlighted in red there. But as Michelle said, we don't want to completely straighten it out and speed it up too fast with that, because that could obviously have impacts too. So we know it's going to have a really positive impact. We know it's early works we could get done. We wanted to make sure we were getting the appropriate authorisations from all parties. But as Michelle said, there's probably going to be further work that is in a location like this, but it might not be related to.
Sorry, I just got another question. If this was all done and we found, hey, the effects could be a time when this could actually be reevaluated in like 5-10 years time, so we could actually chip a bit more off to create that extra larger, you know, it's a bit of saying you're feeling your way to make sure that it's no adverse things you pushing a problem down. But I'm just looking ahead that you go, hey, look, we did that and actually everything's okay. We think we could actually analyse it again and say that we could actually take another.
And so
maybe.
The consent conditions are pretty robust in terms of what assessments we have to be doing pre and post, and so making sure that we are learning on the way through to inform not just further works that might be Kanoa funded or on the Matoba, but how it would inform other works where we know we've got these sorts of build-ups and these kinds of pinch points. So
okay.
The other thing, the other thing here too is there's a key infrastructure relationship with the rail bridge, okay? So I feel that as we move through the technical validation piece, and it is actually part of the technical validation, Kanoa have asked that we actively continue our discussions with that asset owner. They need to come to the party on this as well, right? So I think what we're doing certainly relates to our responsibilities in a channel and ensuring that we're protecting the communities and providing maximum channel flow. However, there will be a point where we sit down with that information and say to Kiwi Rail, who have indicated that this funding will is really the catalyst for them to look at their business case for fixing that bridge.
And we also had early conversations with Fonterra and others in terms of how do we make sure that we are broadening that stakeholder base for the future work. So as Michelle said, this really is early works identified as through the operational delivery teams, you know, things that we knew were an issue. Modelling backed up that they were an issue and gave us a good way of quantifying how much benefit we would see from doing the work. And so, yeah, there'll definitely be more to be done in this neck of the woods as we traverse the rest of the programme.
This may be commercially sensitive, but at our workshop earlier in the year, there was a considerable push to get local contractors, so we get a succession running and we build up a contracting system within our environment for our Southland people. Is that happening? Because I see this contract has been awarded. Can you tell me more? Is it commercially sensitive?
No, I can. So I can talk to you about the process. Local contractors were, in all of the Kanoa program to date, local contractors have all been invited as part of the procurement process. With this particular project, the team did originally go out looking at this at a smaller scale. We swooped up, put that into the Kanoa program, went back out. You're quite correct. The Kanoa program is absolutely geared towards ensuring that there is local contractors and local economic benefits. So the process is focused in the on local contracting, with a strategy to think about as we go forward and moving over the next 3 to 4 years. What does that strategy look like, and what sort of pressure does that put on our local contractors as well? Because they also provide operational support, and we need to be mindful of the sequencing of these programs. But yes, the relationship with this project also connects in with Gore District Council, who will be taking some of the material that's spilled to help with their landfill matters too.
Just add as well, when we're through the contract execution and commencement phase, we'll be able to tell you a bit more specifics about the who and the what, but probably not today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Bill Morris.
Oh, it's a good observation. I mean, I appreciate that infrastructure is fixed and long-lived, but the river itself is dynamic and changeable. And this probably speaks to those different time horizons that you've alluded to in the works program. That we shouldn't assume this is a permanent fix by any standard. This will be something that you might return to in different ways. And I'm assuming over the 5-year project, as we define what's happening elsewhere in the river system, that could also shape your thinking around future interventions at particular points like Gore in the future.
Yeah, 100%. Sorry, through you, Chair. Yeah, 100%. That's the intention, and I think the work that we previously commenced in the modelling space gives the Matoa a good leg up for what needs to be and could be across broader stretches than we are considering in relation to this specific piece of work. It really, as I said, is considered early works, taking the opportunity that Kanoa has provided us to get this ink addressed. As we know the risks that were associated with it, but much more to be done in terms of validation of it.
I think through the Chair, a key part of what we're talking about, Councillor Morrison, is also the operational maintenance regime that follows these works, okay? And that's the key to keeping a dynamic system like a natural river also sort of, within its flow capacities is what you couple that with in terms of maintenance.
We have to build the long-term transformational program and the whole blueprint from mountain to sea at the same time as dealing to those short and medium-term horizons in terms of works that we now need to do for now, and then to the asset management point.
I think, yes, no, I just wanted to say that I think the philosophy about these works, and that you're basing it on technical knowledge, modelling of what it's going to do, so that you fix the situation or manage the situation at a particular point without causing adverse effects either upstream and downstream. And that philosophy is something that's really important for this work and other work as well. So I'm really supportive of the amount of technical modelling and information that's gone into this. I initially, perhaps like Jeremy, thought, oh, well, perhaps he should take out a lot more stuff, but clearly there's a risk that you did, then there would be adverse effects upstream and downstream. So I really support the way this has been planned, and hopefully will be undertaken, and in the future you can monitor it and see if it needs to be altered. Very good.
Through Chair, just to add as well, I mean, we're learning all the time through these processes. The consenting pathway that we undertook for this was complex. It involved us and Gore District Council, and we've already undertaken a review of the process to make sure that we're learning our lessons from that particular step that we need to go through to inform both future works for the Kanoa programme, but also our future works in terms of our business as usual. So yeah, it gives us opportunities for learning across.
Phil, near. Oh, no, Phil and Dave. Oh, no, David. Sorry, getting mixed. David, near.
Yeah, but what Lucy's just said, I'm wondering what the lessons have been learned through this, because I know in August at the material meeting, I'm sure Dave Henderson said that, you know, it had taken much longer, and he was going to look in and try and get to the bottom of it. So, because it is a long time from August till now. So secondly, on your river flows, if we end up with a winter river flow coming through, is that it for the season till spring? On taking this out, because, you know, very shortly the river will lift for the winter. Really.
Yeah. Again, all we could do is through the procurement process and scope here is ensure we've got mitigations. There are some works where the contractor they'll be starting on the true right, and because it's not just sort of close in stream, it is sort of widening, and there's areas that we can stage and come to. At this point, they've got 35 days of mitigation factored in their program, so we will be agile with dealing with the event, but the program shows that they'll get in fairly quickly and take advantage of the weather. But you do raise the point, if we do get winter flushes and we do get flooding, we will have to obviously demobilise and come back.
Can I have a second question just quickly about about the Arete, going back to that?
Yes.
We mentioned going to a 1 in 20 year outcome.
Yes.
For defects, I guess.
Yes.
I'm just trying to understand, because it's been explained going back to the original form of the event, which is like when it's new, like it's. So how are we prioritising that? Because that's only going to be in a small section of bank on the Arete, and there's a large amount outside of that. Is putting 4 inches on top the best bang for our buck? Have we got other priorities like the bank realignment further downstream near Winton? There's a pinch point down there that's quite bad. So again, I guess I'm just worried that we will run out of money before we get there. So just an update on that.
Really good question, Chair, and I've actually got some great maps which we've been working through that prioritisation. It's a combination. It isn't just the remediation is driven by the work the asset operations teams have informed that these are critical areas that are well under their serviceable levels and profile. But the success of the Arete under these 2 tranches does involve addressing some of those channel constraints, and it does involve some realignment. We've had early discussions with some of those areas. We were out a couple of weeks ago, having discussions on the ground about what that looks like. But it does involve some channel realignment and also remediating to strengthen the areas that are sort of the worst critical areas.
Can I just add just briefly to that? The maps are helpful from a understanding of how we can reprioritise, given that we got that further tranche, that second tranche of money. So what we were intending for tranche 1 for the Arete was quite narrow. And then when we put the announcement about the second tranche of money, that's meant that we've been able to kind of take stock and look at what the prioritisation would be for a broader stretch. And so it's that work that Michelle's talking about in terms of how do we make sure that we're getting best bang for our buck, and that we're programming the work out across the 2 tranches, and taking into account the resourcing constraints as well as the consents that we would require to do different pieces. So that staging work is what Michelle's referring to in terms of that prioritisation.
Okay, here.
You think in your first slide, you had some work on the Whitestone. It was quite minimal in comparison to some of the other expenditures. So how do you decide what part of that river you're dealing with? And is it near the bridge? Because I understand there's a fibre optic cable that carries as well, and it could be quite susceptible. So I'm just, is it, what part of the Whitestone were you looking at in that first slide?
You got me. Because the town, our project is in such great hands.
No, that's all right.
Look,
Can you come back to me?
I
Thank you.
absolutely
That's all I
can.
need.
There is a logic to that.
Yeah, I'm
and
sure
it's
there is.
certainly,
I'm kind of interested in what it is.
the areas where have been identified, I guess, we put forward under that funding as mostly the constricted areas to provide some more channel capacity by floodplain. But I will absolutely raise that.
No, that's
with the
fine. Thank
project
you.
lead.
I could add as well, Chair, if that's helpful, just so the prioritisation for the spots that were chosen for the TNL work included both the state highway consideration and the comms link.
That might be the
So,
answer.
but we can definitely come back to you with specifics on the site. But as you said, it is quite small in comparison to some of the other big projects. Mitch and Paul have been working through that with the community.
Thank you for that.
Just got a couple of things, just quickly. I have had a couple of phone calls around the Gore, with the Gore district plan now. We're getting the hazards floodplain when I see this.
Oh, this is there. That's
Yeah, we've already talked a wee bit about this, but I just want to talk around this. That, you know, we're doing this work, but of course we're informing, hey, when Gore, if Gore goes under, the building permits now are, people are getting informed. Now I need to verify it. That's what I'd like to know. They're at 1.6 metres above where they are building now, which makes things a wee bit difficult around that the channel that the water ever went through Gore. So there's a discussion what we're doing out in the river, and people are looking, going, well, why isn't it more, or dig the channel deeper, you know, protect the town from a local community basis, because rules are coming into play of the information as we get the modelling. We know how things will look. It's affecting the businesses and the towns and Gore of future building restrictions. Not saying it's wrong, but it's actually giving them the information. They're going to deal with it. But just this is what's going around the community when we're sitting there down. Well, we've dug a bit out of the side of the banks here. We're fixing. We're given a small capacity. It doesn't take away the issues that the information is providing for the local community and what the future holds around their building.
I might jump in on
So,
that one, Chair, if that's
It's a bit of an
okay.
interesting.
And I might look to Liz too, in case to keep us procedurally safe, because I'm not in the detail of where we're at in terms of the appeals. But the work that we advanced in regards to not so much this channel widening piece, but the broader Matoda project, we briefed Gore District Council last year on what we were intending, what we were planning. They're on our list to go back to and talk to them now. We've got some more detail. I think what's really critical is that we continue to work really closely with our TA colleagues and whānau, making sure that we aren't stepping over each other or falling over each other, but also that we're using, all of us have to use the most the best and information that we've got. So our team, my team, were involved in the hearing process and provided information through the district plan process. The decision made, I'm looking at Liz desperately, the decision's been made and we're in an appeal phase now, right? Yeah, so in terms of what the decision ultimately gets made in terms of the district plan decisions, yet to be seen. I think that the really critical piece though, and back to my point right at the start about the different paces of our work, this is core spatial planning stuff, where and what we can develop and what's safe and what's not needs to intersect with the work that we're doing and vice versa. They have to feed each other. So the Gore conversations thus far have been about making sure our models can speak to each other. They've got stormwater modelling, they've got a whole bunch of other modelling about the capacity of their systems. We need to make sure that we're connecting those conversations moving forward. So,
and just quickly with the consent ongoing, if this all gets cleared and this gravel build up again in the same, because these are gravel build up areas, probably over time. there's the consent, once it's cleared, that's the end of the consent, or is it an ongoing saying, hey, we need to keep these channels? We've done the work, we want to make sure nothing builds up there again.
Yes.
That's what I'm
It
asking.
has a facility.
Yeah, maintenance provision.
Maintenance provision, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
15-year concession.
Yeah.
David Adamson's due to be here, but he's caught up in transport issues. I think it's a 15-year consent, but I need to double check.
Not 10.
Yeah, we
Absolutely allowed.
to debate it, so to speak.
Yep.
Remove if it does build up
Yep.
to keep those channels.
And again, the conditions are real
Yeah.
clear in terms of ongoing monitoring that's required. I mean, we've got the metric LiDAR through there. It's the most substantive model in terms of the impact of this area. And so rerunning bathymetric is quite not, I wouldn't say cheap, but it's cheaper than doing terrestrial LiDAR. And Tim's already got plans for what we might be doing with drones in future. And so there's a whole raft of work that we can be doing over that period to make sure we've got ongoing monitoring and getting back in if we need to build up.
It'll be good if there's a ministerial visit to be able to point to the railway bridge there. They're standing on there.
We'll get them standing on it.
Yeah, standing on it. We'll make sure they do see it. So.
Yeah.
Well, good project.
One time there's a train. Maybe you could schedule it. See, there's a parallel conversation about returning trains. Might be able to do it on the same day. Maybe the ministers could travel by train. Jokes aside, having that evidence base is really important. To justify the work and to assess its effectiveness and ongoing impacts. So, and I hear what you're saying about the costs of collecting that information. And I guess I'm keen that we consider how we can increase our local and maybe even internal capacity and capability to collect that type of information. So, I'm interested to know whether we have any early thinking about that at this point, but it seems something that's really relevant region-wide, and that there may be opportunities to achieve some cost savings by being able to do that in-house and in a timely fashion. And I am heartened to see and hear the conversation around this fitting into a wider catchment plan, and hoping that we might hear more about that soon. So I shall save the question I have related to that.
I'll answer the first one and just say that yes, that we have started thinking about what internal capacity we might need for being able to do some of these kinds of assessments in-house. We've got some capacity in-house, but not sufficient for the extent of the work that we know we're going to need to be doing. Fair to say the rule framework continues to shift and flow and change, so we need to be upping our resourcing in order to enable my team to effectively respond to those changes, and that goes for that broader integration across the organisation in terms of assessing impacts and making use of ecologists and expertise that we do have in the business. So those conversations have started. It will come back to you through LTP conversations, I think. Not getting ahead of myself, but I think we will probably be needing an uplift in some of those areas to make sure that we've got the skills in the right places for the right things to enable us to continue to move at pace. So, and on your second question around the whole of the catchment plan, yes, we're very excited about it too. We will definitely be back to talk to you about it very soon.
Right.
Yeah, just to follow that, I'm wondering then if that in-house expertise is potentially as a shared service within or under or beside the spatial planning framework, so that our colleagues and us are contributing and benefiting from that expertise. So perhaps it's a shared service opportunity rather than it just being ours.
I think, yes, potentially. One of the things that I've been flagging, and since Tim started with us, we've been talking lots about kind of a gap assessment of the broader what we need, what's the group need. And I think we've got to before piece that we need to be considering in terms of before we do works, what's the skills and expertise that we need in order to do that. So some of that's modelling, but some of it's how do you apply for a consent, make sure we're doing those pieces. We've got the during the work piece that we've got really excellent work supervisors who help us to manage those pieces. And then we've got the after piece, which I think is to Councillor Hobson's point around how do we ensure we're monitoring the impact of our work. So those 3 phases of our work programme, we're a little light, so we just need to make sure we've got the right resources doing the right things to cover us across all those. And I think, yeah, shared services is definitely something we've been talking about at the executive table, but also I know that there's conversations with the TAs about those things.
And through your chair, we're also having some conversations amongst the regional councils, Southland regional councils, around gaps in our teams that we might be able to do some collective job sharing.
Cool.
Okay. Yes. Good discussion. Carry on.
Just clarify, thank you, Dave. The consent expires in 2046. So we've got a fantastic opportunity to gather a lot of intel and to get that maintenance regime in place.
Got a 20-year
20
consent, yeah, to be able to
Yes.
do as we please, but actually work within that area.
Definitely not. Definitely work with constraint
Based on good
and
data,
restraint and
I should say.
yeah.
But it is, would deal if there is issues.
Absolutely. Okay. The other project that falls under tranche 2, which sits just outside of the suspensory loan, is the national telemetry project. It's a 3-year program. It forms part of a national telemetry program. ECAN are managing this contract with Kanoa, with most of the regional councils and sub-agreements. Southland signed their agreement with ECAN along with the rest of other regional councils in March, and now we're in the process of going through the Commission's precedent and doing all that sort of work. So this is also an exciting project that really connects into the tower about enhancing flood insights to be able to strengthen our understanding of flood behaviour and system performance. It's pretty exciting actually, including some camera monitoring and you know, information and intel is one of the key you can't have enough of really in the business that this is. So really good. And I expect that this will have a lot of ability for we can continue as a national initiative. I did want to touch on fuel pricing impacts and management. So for the Kanoa program, look, we do have there is an impact, obviously, with a lot of our physical activities have a relationship with diesel, and it relates to construction works. We do have an increased risk of variations, particularly where contracts were priced on the earlier fuel assumptions. It does add pressure to the contingencies. How are we managing that at this point in both the programs? We're assessing the fuel impact case by case with variations through formal contract processes. Cost increases for the Kanoa program are being managed through the projects. There are no scope reductions being anticipated as yet. We've got active monitoring with our contractors and a sensitivity testing of where those budgets may actually have an impact. We've been proactive in talking to our contractors and going out and saying, where are you sitting with this? For the contracts that we currently have in place, which is around $2.5 to $3 million worth of contracts awarded under Kanoa for physical works, most of those occurred in March. So for our contractors, they're really looking at a March period. Their contracts actually have fuel escalation excluded. However, that doesn't mean not being in good faith and looking at those impacts being pulled on. So we're getting that information coming in. Once we get that in, we'll be able to have a look at probably the long range forecast of how that impacts those budgets over the programs over the next 6 months. Overall for Southland, look, it's alive, but it's a controlled risk. We do have budgets to manage it, and we do have program controls. And by program controls, I mean we have yet to look at our future packages. We can time that. We can also look at deferring certain packages and just seeing where I guess the crisis heads over the next 6 to 9 months. From a sector position, there is an approach holistically with Kanoa, from the Kanoa sector with how they're going to treat it. Early discussions with Kanoa are they are not anticipating revising the funding amounts, but they will consider councils who want to look at either extending their timeframes or looking at deferring that. So what I have asked is through our river sector, which supports our flood protection and river channel management works, is we actually stand up a discussion so we can collectively share how each council is treating and managing it. But from a Kanoa position at this point, we are looking well in control of what our outcomes look like with our future contracts. Next steps for both the Kanoa programs is really confirming our priorities and sequencing across our projects. We're progressing planning and design work. We have some heavy lifting to do in our ongoing coordination engagement with councils, landowners and stakeholders, and also our public comms area. And sharing each updates and working, as Lucy asked us to think about how that template looks to provide consistent updates so there's a good visibility. We do have all the elements of comms and pieces of priorities. I think for this quarter, April, May, June, what you'll find is the programs will start bedding down with some additional resources coming on board into Southland, and being able to really sort of get a feel for what some of the scoping and sequencing looks like across the projects. It seems like we're going slowly into tranche 2. There's a good reason for that. With Kanoa, the transactional relationship isn't established, so really we can't actually draw down on that loan anyway. But tranche 1 is progressing well. It will really pick up and get back on track soon. So I think we're in a pretty good position for our program. We have an overall kind of amber approach, largely driven by the fuel crisis at the moment across the program, which most councils have changed to, but we're well in control of what's next and how we set all of this up. Questions?
Yeah, cheers, sorry, it's late. Just a question around materials. Obviously, it's contractor commitments, but obviously the rush on anything to do with plastic, 30% left 1st of May. Are we planning that initiatives going in 8 days left in the month? Are we looking at purchasing that stuff now to try and take away the pressure of that price lift at least to control that price?
Operationally, that might be a question that we need to consider, but certainly from a Kanoa program, any supplies, our contractors have been also asked to look at the impact on all forward purchasing they need to do with culverts or things like that are part of the program. So that's part of the sensitivity that we're running, and hopefully we'll have that position for Patrick and Lucy in the next week or so. Are we making a position? Are we taking a preemptive strike on forward purchasing? I'd have to talk to the operational staff with the approach on that. Councillor Hamilton. Yeah.
I guess the question is the contractors, is there, I guess, the fact that we're still getting contracts lined up, that leaves contractors a wee bit open. Well, the contracts aren't complete to be able to forward purchase, I suppose. Sorry, just Morris's comment is that falls to the contractor, but 30% is quite a large increase. So, yeah.
But I think that might play into looking at sequencing and staging of works, and also, what materials are required as under the Kanoa program. For now, with the Kanoa projects, it's largely all around fuel, diesel. They're not sort of flagging material supplies of other products.
Should be.
Yeah, just through Chair, just add that certainly from an operational delivery perspective and the work that Tim and David are doing, sort of forward planning the prioritisation space, that's definitely on their radar in terms of what are the things and the pieces of material that we'll need. We also are preparing for an uplift in regards to the herbicide and the spraying purchases that we make. So I don't think we haven't got more detail for you for today, but definitely as we update our forward programme, we will be coming back to you via Patrick's briefings, I would imagine. We are live to it. Well, did you want to have a look at the maps that we've got, Chair? Would that
I've just got 3 questions
Oh, sorry.
after David.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, this may be a little premature, but I think we've got to really get our hands on this program as it goes forward, because there is a lot of money involved and we are leaving a debt to our constituents at the end of it, maybe. So is there a process set up that is reporting to us in relation to the costing and the progress that's being made, so we can accurately get a hold of it? Because at the moment it seems there's a whole lot of variables jiggling around that you did state in your commentary, that basically at the moment we're not affecting the total amount of work we're going to get done. But we've got to keep a hold on that, because we have a contract, I understand, to get it finished with Kanoa or with the government. How do we intensively monitor that?
So 2 things to address your question there, Councillor. First up, we obviously have governance arrangements at staff level that Rob sits on, and a quarterly meeting that we report through. Patrick and I co-sponsor the programme oversight. What my suggestion would be to answer your specific questions, though, is a detailed report back through the ICMC committee, so that you can, much like we do for our operational delivery, where you get kind of a breakdown of all the contracts and expenditure, we've got that level of detail and you should be seeing it. So how we package that and frame that for yourself, that's the reporting line that I would recommend. There's a secondary line, though, for the Finance and Performance Committee in terms of how it sits in terms of our broader organisational performance. So there's 2 ways we can formalise the reporting. The team have got a report already drafted, intended to head to the next Integrated Catchment Management Committee. So that would be one of those opportunities where you'll get to see the breakdown of costs versus predicted expenditure.
And just following on from that, if I can share, the information coming to the oversight group that I chair will come through, the relevant information will come through the council. So yeah, you won't be seeing all the information coming through.
Can I just have a supplementary on there? Okay, it's fine to understand what's being spent. Where are we?
And that will include, we'll also need to be reporting. Here's the program.
Yep.
And here we're at the various stages. It's the milestones. It's what we're envisaging the report shaping up. So you have a clear picture. Yes, here's what we planned and funding. Here's what here's where we're at.
Sorry.
So I think just at a high level, Councillor Gibson, I do want to reassure you that we're not waiting for that contract. We have full program management in place. So there is a master program. We have full financial controls. We're reporting and we're tracking that. So again, going back to Lucy, it's just that dashboard on how we give that to you. But it is absolutely being monitored and tracked, and it's in place. No different to tranche 1. There is a master program schedule,
Which we haven't seen in tranche 1.
Through you, Chair, so that it's been presented to you in previous workshops, but we haven't tabled it through the committee structure yet. So that's what we'll be putting in place for the next round of committee meetings.
Because we need some pressure on our CEO in the next 6 months.
Certainly do. Are we providing good briefing?
Yeah, I guess my question was along the same lines, and it was around the financing about actually understanding where we are, where we're going, whether we're on budget, whether we're over budget, all of that, some more details so that, like Alistair says, we don't end up getting all historical stuff and then you find out that you're in a different place from where you'd expect it. So some historical, but some proactive so that we can see and assess whether we're happy at where it's going, and particularly the rationale stuff. I want to really make sure we're getting bang for our buck. We're not just spending the money.
Got the idea. In regards to that, I'm sorry, you and then Phil.
My understanding from the Kanoa project is there are milestones that you have to report on through the, so that will feed back to what we're seeing as well. Would suggest.
Yes, for tranche one, so we report to Kanoa monthly and quarterly. That happens, there's a process well in place with tranche one with that master schedule and the financial controls that sit behind that. Okay. For tranche two, we've set up the same controls. We're actually building a pretty nifty dashboard, which is interactive relating to the location. We can click on and you'll just see that. That'll be sort of set up over the next month. But there is absolute project controls around both tranches. Yeah.
So I suppose the point being, we've already got one set of reporting in place. We don't need another information. We actually need going through to what we're seeing.
Yeah.
So just an additional, if I may. So the Kanoa signing, Michelle, you talked about the delay.
Yes.
Is that having an influence on cash flow and what we decide or what's happening around actually contract start?
Good question, Councillor Matheson. No, it isn't, because in a way, the milestones to kick off tranche two really only began last quarter. And that quarter three was really called project establishment. I'd sort of envisaged that there'd be a bit of a lead in, and now we're moving into the technical validation. To answer to your question over cash flow, we are carrying costs which are agreed with Kanoa that they would reimburse costs from October last year onwards. So we will be doing that in our first drawdown. So we'll get that income, if you like, how we treat it, back into our books. In terms of cash flow and forecast for standing up the technical validation piece, we're on track in terms of we've just got to stand up those work streams. You'll be able to have visibility, as Lucy's saying, around that, but the intent always was with tranche two program that there was an ability to come into it slowly, and most of those costs will relate to design and getting things in place to set that up. There will be some early works towards the end of the year on both projects, but that's quite a lot.
I think I'll just add to, we're not unique in this situation.
Yes.
So the Crown's been quite upfront about the fact that it takes time to work through their process, but we're acting in good faith. There's a number of councils who've started some of their tranche two work as early as May last year, and the Crown is committed to recompensing them as well. So we're not alone in this space, but certainly the first part of the program is in stand-up phase of technical validation.
Right. Phil,
I'm just going to observe hearing questions that seem to me to express a concern for governance and making sure that governments can exercise appropriate oversight. And I emphasise, I support the idea that use existing systems, don't create something new just for this one project, but also just emphasise that whatever system is in place needs to assume that it is resistant to changes in governance arrangements, because a 5-year project, it seems likely that the faces sitting around the governance table will likely be different faces, and it could potentially be even a different organisation who's providing governance by the end of this project. So whatever system is in place needs to withstand the reorganisations, the amalgamations, the things that will change how we govern our resource management in Southland. So I'm heartened to hear that there's things in place, because I suspect we may even have a different CE by the end of the 5-year project.
There's major detail
Get one first.
underneath it. I just get to talk to the surface of it, but there is major detail supporting programs.
Thanks. There's also a risk and assurance committee piece here, and I'm wondering whether it's appropriate for the risk and assurance committee to make a conscious decision about what level, at which point, or points, because it's a scale of escalation. The risk and assurance committee need to be made aware of, and perhaps the Kanoa projects need their own specific item or whatever, but I think that this is something that the risk and assurance committee, to allay everybody's concerns about budget blowouts or whatever, the risk and assurance committee should be overseeing whatever system we put in place. I think we need to make a conscious decision about what those trigger points are for us to be aware of the things. So I don't.
So through you, Chair, the work that you'd asked the Rob, the CE, to commission in terms of those governance layers is touching on some of that in terms of, and to Councillor Morrison's point, we don't want to be reporting the same information three different ways to three different committees, but there are different lenses that you apply in those committees. The ICMC committee is obviously mainly focused on, are we delivering what we said we were going to deliver, which is a rationale point and what are we designing and how is it going, which is operationally focused. There's a finance piece there in terms of any deliverables need to associate, and then a risk piece as well. So I think that the work that Bruce Robertson has been helping Rob to kind of articulate will cover some of those recommendations. The pieces, the detail that Michelle's talked about, our working group report's 100 odd pages, so we want to be able to split those elements to serve your various different committees' needs rather than have to do three different kinds of reporting in three different ways. So yeah,
I'm conscious that we need to make a conscious decision about what those
which ones are which
trigger points are for risk particularly. We don't hear all the gory details until we need to.
Can I make the point though, Lucy? I think a 100-page report on something that we're borrowing the amount of money we are is chicken feed to what we do read, and I'd rather have a report that was wholesome rather than, this is part A and you go, well, oh, that's in part B and you've got to go to another meeting to get it. So just that it's not too segregated.
Right.
Okay, we've got maps and whatnot that people might want to have a look at when we break for tea, maybe, if that's a helpful suggestion. Yes, so Tim and David's here as well to talk about the next part, which is our. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Broader kind of where to.
Quarter past, it's on half an hour or
We can take it whenever you'd like.
I do want to have a quick 5-10 now, so we're going to have a break, like
Yes.
12:30. Okay. Eric has spoken, have a break.
Take
We'll be
5
back in
minutes.
10. We'll be back in 5 to 10 minutes. Oh, we all been.
Never been in my.
ICM, forward work program, drainage and water recycling.
So, shall
There we
we back to it, team? So, yeah, we've got Tim is with us to talk about the work that him and his team have been doing in terms of our forward work program, and David Allenton's here too to talk about how it intersects with the work of the delivery operations team. So, we're building from the conversation from the last ICMC committee in terms of that asset management conversation, but just providing you with further context around the work programming approach and what you're likely to see and hear more of over the next week. So we're in Tim's hands.
No, all good. Take it away, Tim.
As Lucy said, this is just a follow-up from the asset management discussions we had at the workshop last month. It's just to look at how we're going to go forward, improving the way we look at forward works and how it's going to be presented, to give clear visibility on what's being done and why it's being done and what the costs and implications are, to directly support upcoming LTP decisions and written decisions, particularly around flood investigations and modelling outcomes. Hopefully I won't take too long because you've covered a lot of this with the Kanoa stuff. So I'll try and pick up the pace and get us back on track. So the forward work programs are primarily to bring all the activities together, look at stuff, and change the way we approach things, looking holistically across the catchments rather than just in isolation, to give us more targeted, rather than targeted, a more realistic look of how we program works and the effects across the catchments. It's the focus on working across catchments, not just individual projects. So what we do here might affect downstream, and what can we do upstream that might benefit more than just doing what we've been doing, and develop. What we're looking at doing is developing a risk and consequence framework. So we need to build a robust network knowledge, increase our sort of modelling capacities and understand the network better. So we'll be looking at the programs in a different way. So we're looking at moving away from annual works and looking at more targeted annual works over multi years rather than just individual. So looking at flood erosion risks and how we can prevent them, how we can prioritise operational knowledge, and a shift towards thinking in terms of catchment-wide programs, not just individual projects. So the result will be a clearer sequencing and better understanding of trade-offs and better understanding of how we prioritise work. What we'll be looking to do is integrate the work and prioritise it on what we consider the current levels of service and realistic deliverables. The outcome is going to be clearer sequencing and better visibility and trade-offs. This is going to be important to council as it's going to provide a more robust basis for prioritisation and look at how we can deliver better outcomes for our catchment and people. So what's changing is there's going to be a stronger link between what we do now, the risk, the cost, and it's going to be clearer, more consistent planning across the catchments, and there'll be clearer visibility of what work is getting done. So what's not changing is the emergency response obligations, statutory responsibilities, and the resilience of local operation knowledge. So the key risks that we've identified at the minute is the challenges around the maintenance, particularly as a lot of the maintenance works reactive, event-driven, and it's variable between catchments. The service expectation is not always clearly defined, and the risk consequence framework is still being finalised. So until we get a
real clear framework. We don't have as much knowledge as we'd like to identify these risks and give us confidence in what we're delivering is the right outcomes. So what we need to do next is we need to strengthen our policy and decision frameworks, and we need to adopt the MP policy, which is going to come across the table shortly. Working on an asset management plan and a strategic asset management plan, which will give us an idea of how we're going to approach these things. We also want to create clearer links between work programs and the rating approaches that we've got. These will have some trade-offs, obviously, with what we can afford and what community impacts we're going to allow and what risks we're going to adopt. So there's going to be some decisions for council to do on a priorities list. So what risk consequences are we going to accept? What are we not going to accept? And what priorities you've got? What we're going to protect? What we're going to not protect? And that sort of thing. So they're the sort of questions that will come to you over the next few council meetings over the next year or so as we define the risks and knowledges that we've got. Questions?
Eric and South.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that. I just noticed in one of your earlier slides, better visibility.
Yeah.
Quite often I get asked questions, how come we're doing what and why? And I said, the answer's all on our website. You had a look there. Where do I find that? So I just want to know how we're going to deliver better visibility or more public engagement with our visibility, or what do you actually mean by more visibility?
Well, there'll be more transparency in what we deliver, which will be presented through council and then obviously go on our websites. And I'm assuming what we're doing now is we put out the magazines and we do the stuff in there, and that will give a clear direction on what we're doing, why we're doing it, and the approaches we're going to adopt going forward.
So it's probably more fulsome than it's been.
Yes.
But using the same channels.
Well, we haven't got any other channels really.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
Yeah. So
okay. I just wanted to know what that meant.
Look, it's the approach we're going to take is going to be more visible and clearer how we're going to adopt what we're doing.
Thank you.
So there'll be a streamline in what we're doing.
So thank you.
I think I'd probably just add too, one of the things that I've been, and me and my new group, new teams have kind of been gripping up over the last wee while, has been making sure that we've got visibility on the work programs. And like I mentioned right at the start, there's some that are BAU, which will always be kind of responsive. And so, you have an event or something comes through, some of it's planned, and that's that kind of longer term in response to doing assessments. But the transparency point is primarily around how do we weave together a work program that's integrated across these things and then talk about it more deliberately, and that needs to touch Kanoa work all the way through to BAU and maintenance. So how we talk about it will shift and change, and that's one of the things that we need to be bringing back to you. The other part is how are we making those decisions, and what guidance and direction will you give us about what you want us to prioritise. So both of those things need separate streams that need to be internet connected.
My question, when I'm listening here, is we're not going to be sitting here for 2 years while we work something out. But we still have and I suppose I'm speaking on the past when we've had around river management. There's been changes how we've had to work. It was almost the traditional way, which then the plans come in place, and all of a sudden the community felt like bang, stop. We're working things out, and I do believe we'll manage things differently in the future, but there's that transition that we still have to do business as usual with it in regards to some of this stuff. So I hear a lot of, we're going to work it out plan, but I'm hoping that things are still working. We've still got to do things. Whether we think they'll be different in the future, that's cool, but we still want to see not more talk and paperwork and that. We still are improving.
So just quickly, and then Tim and David might want to come up too and jump in. But so at the moment, the way that we plan our work program will continue and as we transition. So how we do our work currently isn't changing. What Tim and the new team are creating is a more transparent way of how we do our work and a more consistent way that you will guide us in terms of what you want us to prioritise, what the community needs, and moving forwards like that. So it's not that the work is changing, the work will still be ongoing, we've got budgets need spending, work that needs doing. It's more about how do we transition to a more planned work programme so that we're kind of shifting away from quite a responsive mode to a more forward planned one. So and it's not to say that any work will reduce with teams. They're doing all of their normal BAU. It's just about how do we bolster it so that they're getting ahead, really is the plan.
And that's probably, you said budgets, that we have budgets that we are rating for things now that you might go, oh, that's different in the future, we can't spend, we've got, you know, if we're rating for something, it's got to be done.
It's more about,
That's visibility,
Yeah.
clarity, and transparency of what helps.
it's more about trying to transition from that reactive work and do more planned work, or looking at the planned work we've done. But that's not going to stop. It's just going forward. As that works, is there something else we can do? Can we improve things further upstream that's going to benefit downstream? It's looking at a bigger picture. Until we get that and that information, we can't change what we're doing because we're just not providing a service.
That's what I'm trying to say, that we still, this is transitioning, that we still have to, can't just stop because we've been doing something for 150 years.
Yeah.
There is a transition that we will be doing something.
And as I pointed out, for the maintenance, we are in a position to do that now. We're looking more at the capital works, the bigger picture sort of stuff that we can sort of identify through the Kanoa projects.
And we want to ensure we've got consistency across our catchments as well, in terms of the work supervisors need support to ensure that they're prioritising their work where council are directing them to. And we have to ensure that we've got each catchment gets the same level of service from a customer service perspective as well as from a protection perspective. So all of those things need not whole scale change, but tidying up and bolstering so that we can be more transparent and we can be more proactive in how we're communicating what the work is and how it connects.
All good. I've got a big list here. John, Morris, Phil, I'll go with those three first.
Next year. Yeah, look, I think you've asked most of what I'm looking for, but also a question was, how much of this outside of Kanoa will be linked to our LTP, just to make sure we are delivering on our long-term plan. A lot of work went into it. It would be nice to think the LTPs going forward aren't just around river management. And I guess what is the scenario if you come back and say, well, that's not working, what the cost of this has changed? Are we going to put a line in the sand and reverse engineer it? So, well, that's what you got to work with. So I'm just looking for a bit of clarity that we aren't looking at stuff that's all of a sudden going to change what the goal of the LTP was, is possibly my biggest concern on it.
No, so what Tim and his new team are gripping up is the intent of the LTP, making sure that we are more planned and more forward focused in terms of those asset management considerations. It's about systemising, it's not about whole scale change in terms of the work that we do. And it's making sure that my team, the operational delivery team, are focused on delivery and not on trying to do all of the planning as well. So very much living the intent of the LTP from a additional resource perspective. And the actual delivery part needs to continue as well. So those works that were intended is what we are delivering through the delivery team. There will be more conversation through into the next LTP about what else you want and what else we need to transition to and what does that look like. The implementation of the rating review decision is a separate conversation that we need to be having with yourselves because there were some decisions made and there's implications from those previous decisions that we need to make sure we have fully understood and fully landed and operationalised. And that is, we're still, we've got a whole list of those questions that we need to be bringing back to yourselves in terms of what do you want us to do with those areas that weren't previously rated. Is one example. So multiple interconnected pieces that we are holding and that are progressing at slightly different paces. I guess it's my short version.
Thanks, Morris.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I know this is a very high level thing, strategic thing, but I note there's a third bullet point talking about clearer links between work programs and rating approaches. I'm not sure what that means. One thing that I'm interested in is promoting as part of the work program, the council and part of the individual works, the ability for us to provide enhanced public access to rivers. Some places like Gore, for example, it's, it's right there. You don't need to do anything, but other places, I think there are opportunities associated perhaps with our works, but also maybe independently as well, to provide public access to the rivers. And in the long term, when we are thinking about managing the rivers better, enhancing biodiversity, all that sort of thing. I know this has been done by Fish and Game in the past, but that's specifically for anglers, even though the public can go there. And the Waiau Trust that Roger works for has provided public access from a number of places on the Waiau, and they are reasonably expensive, looking at a few tens of thousands of dollars to create a track and some interpretation. There's a good opportunity, and in fact, at the Key Bridge on the Mararoa, after the willows were removed downstream of there was an information board put up about what the council had done and everything. So I think there's some good opportunities to tell people more about what we're doing, like what we're saying, but also to enhance access so that people can use the rivers better. I know that's something that I'd like to see us think about going into the future.
Richard, just answer the first question that you had there, and then those other comments definitely we need to consider as part of our future work programme. So you have a question about the different rating approaches. It's one of the inconsistencies that exists across the province at the moment is different catchments have different levels of contribution that they make when we do river works. And so as part of the implementation of the river rating decision you made, we're looking at that and how we can actually provide some recommendations to council about areas that might need to shift or change. What's an appropriate level of expenditure to expect from landowners versus our council contribution? So that's another decision-making point that needs to come back to yourselves to say, we want to make it consistent everywhere so everyone's got clarity, but there might be some variances in terms of if it's works protecting a town, etc., how do we ensure we're financing for that? So that's what those meant by that inconsistency around the rating approaches and the work programme. In terms of the info board, Michelle's still with us, so yeah, definitely we need to be considering how we make sure we're enabling access, but also sharing via different means in terms of those information boards after we do work, but also before, ideally. We wanting to put up signs and whatnot. Yeah. There's been some element of that done for the Matoda work that we're just about to commence. So.
I'll come back with this in the future, but I do think there's a good opportunity for multiple benefits for people, and also for telling the community, people that use the rivers, about what we're doing and why we're doing it.
Okay. Philip.
You think you actually have 3 questions? Sorry. I get it. I fully recognise your comment. This is more than a 1-year journey to work towards full integration.
Yeah.
Is it? And and I was just thinking in respect of the Kanoa phase 3 work and the Mataura as a 5-year project, is it likely that it may emerge at a different pace for different catchments? For instance, will it be a 5-year journey for the Mataura, or are we able to implement it across all of the catchments within a 2 to 3 year kind of journey? Because
I think the approach will be adopted at a similar time, but the knowledge will be more advanced in different catchments. Mataura is far more advanced than the Aparima or the Oriti. The Oriti is next on the list to get more knowledge, but different catchments are going to progress at different times.
Yeah. So I guess I was just wondering if there was like a particular catchment or a particular context that was going to provide a constraint, and that maybe we should case our expectations against that. The slowest regional, the one that's got the most complexity, that's going to take the most getting your head around to understand how that's going to work.
Yeah, I can see your point of view, and I can understand that approach would be realistic. But the adoption of what we want to achieve should still be the framework of what we're going to do. It's the implication or how we can do that might vary.
I think I'd just add there that definitely both for the Kanoa work for Matoda and for Oriti gives us opportunity to move at pace for those catchments, slightly different pace. I would think we will need to do some form of this integration of our work programme for the Oriti early, in the process, given that we've got well-worn goat tracks in terms of our levels of understanding the defects and the work that we know we need to be doing in that catchment, as well as what we're going to need to be doing for Kanoa. So how we can paint that integrated picture of our work being undertaken in that catchment for yourselves and for our community, but also for my team, so they've got clarity about how we are prioritising and where, will be really important. So the already is likely to be the work that Michelle talked about, that prioritisation work, that's going to help with the work that Tim's doing. So that's on a sort of shorter term. In terms of the information that we hold, the Matoda project and that blueprint for 5 years will be the second. They'll be running concurrently, but it's got a slightly longer tail in terms of how we can approach it. And I think there's exciting opportunity for the Matoda space to be very deliberately making the time for the community engagement piece. We're having to run at pace for some of the already work already, and so that means that we're a little bit on the catch up as opposed to being able to kind of really.
I will just add to Lucy's conversation there as well, is we touched on it before, resources that we've got are not quite there yet. So I am trying to speed things up by using consultants, especially on the risk framework, so we can understand the risk that we've got, because that is a big factor, especially in the flood resilience space. So the more we can understand, the better we are. So I need to expedite that using consultants to get.
I guess I wasn't advocating for haste. I'm advocating that we might not get it right every time in the first attempt, and be prepared to change and slow and or speed up as knowledge emerges. Second question was, we've got catchment science summaries, and there was a sense that if we were going to ask farmers to do farm plans under the Appendix N thing, they would connect their farm plans to the catchment context values and challenges document, which between the science summaries and those CCV documents, if they still are a thing, they seem to form a user guide for a catchment. And I would expect our works programs would directly reference those important documents so that we understand and can demonstrate to others how our works are connecting with the well-being of an FMU or a catchment. Was that the expectation, that would be very visible and direct? And
yeah, so through you, Chair, probably just the catchment, the CCBC documents, and also the science summaries. And Karen's here, so we can ask Karen too. But my view of those were very targeted for water quality and land improvement challenges. I think the opportunity for us now is to think about how we use them and how we can potentially pin our work to those contexts whilst looking through a slightly different lens. Flood resilience isn't what they were intended for, but there might be some synergies and some useful points where we can draw through. But I'm looking at Karen in case I'm off base. Did you want to jump in?
Thumbs up. And the third question was, what other regions are already doing this really, really well that we kind of benchmark or seek inspiration from, or have you not had a chance to look at that?
I can do that one too if you want. But quickly, I would just say, so the river manager SIG is very well set up in the space, and we have been for the last year and a half making use of expertise that exists in other regions to come here, mentor our staff, help us with system conversations. They were instrumental in us doing that initial assessment of our asset management maturity and then our self-assessment as well. So a lot of the work that's informing Tim's team's work program is around how do we up our maturity levels in terms of asset management and our work programming. So shout out to the Bay of Plenty who send us a lot of help, and they have got very well advanced systems and expertise that we've been making use of for a couple of years. So, but did you want to add anything?
No, Catchment is a key resource for us. Yeah. They're probably more advanced than we need to be, but they're the probably go-to people.
And we'll continue to leverage the relationships with the river managers as we move through this next phase of work. So.
Thank you.
Next.
Yeah, look, going back to defects, I guess that's been a bit of a bone of contention because we had a big increase last year in them. It seemed to be a change in the way they were looked at. We end up with far too many. We need to understand the priority ones and we need to benchmark them and follow them. And so that comes down to the rationale. So again, looking at Kanoa a little, when you're putting 4 inches of soil on the bank, you need to understand why you're doing that and why you're cutting soil from down here to do it, some of that rationale, so that needs to be really clear, because that has a large impact on budget. But we can do that a whole lot better, because I think you lose people with where it's been in the past. They come out of the meeting and they know there's defects and they still know further ahead as to what they are, whether you're getting on top of them or whatever. And that comes down to the bit about making it clearer. So, yeah, so that's one of the things. And the second one is around LiDAR. We have spent a huge amount of money on LiDAR. And we're told at the time that once we had LiDAR, it would make a total difference on the way everything done. And then you hear that it's got to be interpreted, and that's another whole piece of work. And then you actually wonder when we're actually going to have this magic piece that comes along. And if you're talking about gravel's got all the levels, it can show where it's up. So maybe we need a presentation on where it's at and how it's being used, because we certainly spend a lot of money on it. But, you know, if we're going to spend money on these things, we need to see the direct link as to what the outcome's been, and can't really put my hand on it at the moment. And so, again, making it simple, we spend it on the science to make it easier. We need to be able to clearly communicate how that's changing, and if it's not, then it needs to. And we need to tell people about it, really.
Through you, Chair, the bathymetric LiDAR, which I think is the LiDAR you're referring to, is the one that can see through the water, and that gives us the cross sections and the different scales of the underneath the water, so it gives us those profiles. So absolutely we can do another presentation on that. It would have been before you were on council the last time we talked to council about it, but we've had a whole raft of that work advancing over the last 6 months across our catchments. So, and it's really powerful and useful and feeds into our modelling that tells us where water is likely to go in big events. So we can definitely bring that one back and talk more about where it's at and how the work programme feeds into other pieces. There's also the terrestrial LiDAR that we make use of in an ongoing way, which is the big money that we spent across councils, which would be 2018, 2019 was done. That's the PGF funded LiDAR. So that's already with us, and we use that for more of our land-based activities, but it also feeds into my team's work in terms of where the water isn't and where it might go. So we make use of it for that.
I'm just gonna, I can't read my letters here, but did you have a question?
No.
Okay, so it's not you.
Just listening to
Alistair, you had one. Okay, I'll go Alistair. And then Eric, did you? No, okay, well.
Lyndall.
Well, I've got an E here, so I don't know.
There's no E in there.
Anyway, Alistair.
We have created ourselves an Achilles heel here. We have introduced the rating system capital based, right? We have, and now we've got rid of the F class, where people didn't get any service from us on the river. They did it themselves. So my phone's ringing reasonably hot at the moment, saying, well, you know, we're paying our rates. There's nobody here to help us. And there's two bits here. One is to clean up the F class, and secondly, to maintain it. So where do we go? Because we've got a rates cap. We can't spend more. I don't know. What do we do, Tim? You're a big man.
This is where the priorities list is going to come to its fall. So just because it's been done in the past doesn't mean it's been right. And it could be done rather than every year, every other year, or every third year, and you get more efficiencies and still get the same outcomes.
Yeah, but what I'm saying here is we're asking the staff to do more with the same. And that doesn't go down well in the purchase of our groceries at home.
We're not asking them to do more though, we're asking them to do
well, we've got more to do.
Be smart and work better, more efficient. So
Yeah.
there's a bigger catchment, there's a bigger area to work.
Lucy.
I'll just jump in quick. So just the decision that was made in terms of the rating change meant that we were rating from a larger area, but the deliberate decision wasn't that the expansion of those areas of work would grow. And so there's further work to be done in terms of the rating review implementation, which is what are the questions that we need to get your direction on? Are we expanding the area of work programmed for my teams. Are they going to be expanding into Class F spaces? What are the boundaries for that? So the decision making for that is still we have to land that. We have to come back to you. We have to make sure that we've all understood the same, because I've talked to you all individually, or a number of you individually, and there's slightly different understanding of what was decided. So we're not going to land that today, but the questions, we've got a full slide pack of information to come back to you with a finance support. So Jodie or Patrick will be here to help us with some of those conversations as well, because what was decided versus how we implemented it.
I've got a few people. Well, quickly, then John's got something about this.
I think it doesn't matter what we think here, with due respect, it's what our constituents think out there, or we've got to get a comms program to actually get them to understand that they're back in the line somewhere.
So with due respect, it does matter here, because actually you have different opinions about what decision was made, and we can't communicate that clearly internally to my team or externally to the community if we're not 100% sure of what you want us to do in regards to this. So we need to make sure that this council has revisited that conversation. There is utmost clarity and direction for me, my team, and for the community to be told about. It's not a simple thing. So yes, it's very important that we get it right.
Clarify some stuff. I'll let John.
Yeah, because it does feel like we are almost at risk of relitigating something that should have been recorded strong enough in the LTPs. There was enough examples given. Everybody used that same bridge. Everybody used that airport. Everybody might be farming at the top of the hill, but they still send cows to the works at the bottom of the hill against the river. Now, that was the reasons we gave, which sends very clearly the message we're not doing any more works further than what we are, but everybody shares in the load. Now, that was talked about time and time again in the LTP. So I'm a wee bit confused as to why we feel, why we're heading back to this relitigation.
I think my concern would be we're not relitigating, but we need to land what the implications were for the decision that was made, because there is some scope for work outside of areas if it has a community benefit, if it's going to reduce risk further downstream. There could be cases where we want to do work outside of those previously boundary rated areas, and how we define that, and the work that Tim's talked about already, that how we prioritise, that's where we need to pick that up to make sure that you are directing us in the how it actually applies on the ground. So it's not to say,
Before Rob jumps in, I'll just clarify, you've got F class, and I'll take the Matara because I know them. You had 80% of the land paying 30% of that's the way it was, how it was rated. You've got F class, and then you've got land that was not even any class. So we bought more because there was areas that we couldn't do any work. We weren't rating for it. So there's, just to be clear around the F class, and John's sort of put it together that what they were doing in the hills, they were having an effect on what's happening down on the river. There's bigger, larger areas that weren't paying a lot on rates, to be honest. That the ones further down were dealing with it, and so it's, just to clarify the F class side of things. But there's areas that didn't have any class, they're getting rated for now. Of course, there's probably an expectation why you can do some work in our area, which is that discussion, and that's where we need to sort out.
And there's a difference between
that's the
where
next
you
discussion,
budgeted
looking
to.
ahead. And we need to be, but just want to clarify.
We've got different pots of money as well for different things, so it's important that we talk about it in an integrated way. The River Works budgets that were previously what the team had those 140 rated areas for, it's only one of our budgets that we then spend on behalf of the ratepayers to do the work that we do. So the questions around how does Kanoa fit, and where does the defects come from, and how are we doing erosion work, all of that needs to be weaved together so that we can show a picture of how we are spending our money across our catchments and how you want us to prioritise it. So it's that part that wasn't hammered out as part of the LTP, and that's what we now are very keen to be doing in the next short time frame, so that I know and my team know leading into the next financial year how that's going to roll.
That's the thing, that there will be parts of the community that haven't been rated. Now they are getting rated, and they need to be saying, hey, well, there's work to be done here. We need to know that, and we need to look at budgets, and can we fit that into budgets? We need to, if they need to be adjusted. But that'll affect, any of that work will be rated over everyone. That's from the way we've changed our rating system. Rob, you
Sorry,
know,
Rob.
finalise everything. Is it?
And just coming back to Lisa's point, so we'll bring a paper back to you outlining some of these matters and seeking your endorsement as to which way we go and what we do going forward, just to implement this rating and energy efficiency might be out there. So yeah, expect a paper when the next couple of months.
Yeah, so we had a whole bunch of slides for today, but I didn't think we'd get to them. And Patrick and I need to just make sure we're really clear. Is it a strategy and policy thing? Is it a finance and performance thing? Is it a ICMC thing? Is it a council thing? So once we know where we'll report to, we'll bring it back to you as soon as we can. It's pretty much ready to go. So the staff will workshop on Friday.
I've got Linda, you want to talk about this? I'm just.
Mine's different,
Yeah,
slightly.
are we talking about this?
I just had that one action point potentially
Roger as well, so.
was for the likes of Alistair, who's getting these phone calls from rural ratepayers. An immediate action point would be to have a small laminated comms card that you can keep by your phone with the ES position on this to help you communicate and manage expectations as early as possible. And it would be easy enough, I would imagine, to reference the papers from when this decision was made, so that there is a position statement, so that people don't expect us to rush up and be doing additional river works in areas that we're not even on our radar to do. Because if you're getting these type of phone calls, I think the best thing is to intervene early by you explaining to them based on the ES position, actually, here's how ES arrived at this decision. This is the implications for ratepayers. This is what consultant.
Yeah. And we'll be up there to fix it tomorrow.
No, it's very powerful.
But that is the thing,
It's
is
not.
people can still work with the catchment teams without anyone in Southland that's right to do that. But we couldn't actually physically do any work in certain areas because we weren't rating it.
Yeah.
So I mean right.
Yeah.
There is another discussion to carry on.
It's not just the Alistair at Waimunu, we have people coming in
Yep.
at hidden pay
Yeah.
rates. So
We've got Roger, and then Linda with the patient.
Thanks, Chair. I think John and Phil's comments speak to what I was going to reiterate, which is that our expectations for levels of service come out of that LTP. So that's where our ratepayers' expectations of service should be primarily informed by it, unless there are some extraordinary circumstances, things coming up. Secondly, when I look at our maintenance work schedule for small streams, drainage channels and river fairways, January 26 to December 26, I note that it describes the program that's in place today as being a result of historic information in consultation with river drainage liaison committees, ratepayers, interest groups, SOE groups and other affected parties. So I'm keen to understand where the consultation with them sits. How old is it? How current is it? How does it adequately reflect the outcomes that we want to see in our rivers and streams, and particularly the trajectory towards Hawara being attained and the opportunities for the management of these systems to transition from management of drains to management as small streams and acknowledging their part in the river landscape.
I'll take that one, that's
Okay.
all right. And then I might see if David wants to jump up as well to talk to the detail of what's currently planned. But I can find out an answer to your specific question about when was the last time and who we consulted with to inform that one, because I don't have that at my fingertips and I'd rather get it right than attempt to guess. So I'll find out on that one. But David, do you want to go anything that you want to add in terms of the drainage work program that's currently underway?
To be fair, my
It's not
comment wasn't really asking for an explanation of what we're planning to do
Oh, okay.
this year. I mean, I see that it's scheduled. I don't intend to I have no interest in disputing what's been scheduled. What I'm saying is, how are we putting it there? Has there been sufficient recent consultation to get it there? And I guess particularly, are there objective triggers to get it there, or are we just going back on a 3-yearly cycle or a yearly cycle because that's what we've said historically we're going to do? Is it actually achieving the outcomes we wanted to achieve in these systems?
Oh, I can answer that quickly and then we'll let one of the managers speak. My quick answer would be probably not just yet, but because it's based on historic what we know and what we know we need to be doing on inspections that have previously been undertaken, but part of the work that we're transitioning through will enable us to be making sure that our work is touching base back to those objectives that council was setting. So that'd be the short answer, but either of you, David or Tim, have got a view. Things to add.
I can touch it slightly on that. One of my guys, Jimmy, is working with the ops guys now, looking for the next financial year, and looking at some of that work and how effective it is and where we go forward, and looking at new programs which they're developing across the catchments for the next financial year, which will integrate some of that. So going forward, it will be a different approach. That one is historical, that you probably know more about.
Just going to ask, is this part of this discussion, or are we going down
There's
or
another
get down
lot
into
of
the operations?
slides.
I'm just saying,
It's
because I'm just saying, if we're
Well,
off on it,
it
start
will
with the
fall-
else, that's where we're,
Yeah, we'll fall to the operations side, I think, that question.
yeah, because you're not actually wanting, well, it's about how at the consultation we can come down. I just realised Lyndall's been sitting here for ages to ask a question, just in these round of questions. I don't need to deep dive into the operations as such at this stage. Is that right? Lyndall?
Cool, thank you. So I'd like you to cast your minds back to the start of the presentation. My question is how, and it kind of relates to Councillor Morrison's second question about the CBC things. How are you integrating the likes of the climate impact assessment into your getting ahead of and the forward planning part?
Yeah, obviously the AEP is changing, and things that how we approach the climate change is going to factor in what we do. We also need to look at the models that we've got on the freeboard we've currently got in our network. Once we understand that, we can start adjusting the freeboard and seeing if we need to increase the levels of service in some of the catchment areas, and that will form the risk priorities of what we've got when we do the modelling, and where we see the overtopping and things like that. And then that's where we come back to councillors on the priorities list of what risks they're going to accept and what they're not, and where we identify where we need to bump up the freeboard and lift the flood banks.
Yeah, I think it's because there'll be some places that don't need bump up. They're actually going to be maybe less required.
Yes.
I'm just conscious that I want to know that you've included those climate projection type that data into your forward.
It's part of our asset management plan.
It's not just about the water; it's about the wind and all of that stuff. Thank you.
Carry on.
David plans for a little bit of drainage and small stream maintenance program update as well. So this is kind of into that operational.
I've just come off a role over the weekend in Wellington, a governance role, and Wellington's been hit pretty hard. And I'm going to open up with, I think you've got to do a lot of thinking between now very shortly, and the thinking doesn't stop because the dynamics don't stop. We are constantly changing, and we need to do that. It's not if you're going to get hit, it's when you're going to hit. It's slowly moving further south, we're getting things. So I'm just going to raise that as an opener, that basically what we're talking about today is really important. You need a solid asset management policy. We need to go from reactive maintenance to planned maintenance if we can. The Kanoa program, you're really lucky to have the Kanoa program, but it's actually catching up on your deferred maintenance that you haven't done. It's not actually for moving ahead. You're going to have to set some policies to move ahead. I think there is a lot of work in those kind of last slide that Tim put up there of an asset management policy and an asset management plan to actually do it. Someone raised, what do our ratepayers say? Ratepayers doesn't, I would put it to you that they will say a lot more when a flood comes through their property and they lose their grandfather. There's some pretty major things that are facing New Zealand, and you're an important part of that sort of model. Part of it, are we maintaining the right part of the network? And I think, don't get me wrong, I think the flood banks and the flood plains, we're doing pretty well. But I don't know if we've got the same understanding of what we control under the drainage, because
we have got a network of drains that we have inherited from people that are willing to have paid and let us maintain it. There was no strategic thought that we need from A to B, and that will be part of your asset management plan. So I'm just going to put it out there that collectively with the asset management team, the operations team and yourself, there's some quite big work to be done, and I'd say it needs to be done sooner rather than later, because basically, New Zealand's been hit. I think was it 46 insurance events from flooding in the last 12 months compared to 26 a year before. So I'll leave that where it is, and thought I'd get that off my chest. You can throw me out now if you like, but don't get me wrong, there is some strategy. Doing the discussion with the ratepayers is not about am I going to clean this drain or am I going to clean that drain. The discussion with the ratepayers has got to be, I am cleaning this drain because it gets the highest points, and the way I rank it is on risk, on value of property or whatever. That's the matrix. Let's have the debate on the matrix. And then you come along and say, why haven't you cleaned my drain? I put your drain into the matrix and say, it scored 7 out of 100. In actual fact, we've got a cut-off point at 58, and I'm making these out of 100. And so we're not likely to do it. But basically, as things do, they will come. So the decisions I think we need to talk to our ratepayers is what is the basis of the decisions that we make at climate change, whatever. I think there is also, and you're going to get a presentation shortly from Ella and ICM, there may be some areas, and we are having some discussions at the moment on the lower Waia. There may be areas where we say, well, we're prepared to let the river have this much space before we intervene or whatever. There may be other areas that we say, no, the productivity of that land's too. But those are decisions that you have to make and whatever. And so there's some quite good, exciting stuff, but I think it's on urgent rather than it's need to have rather than nice to have. Is that? Anyway, what are we doing? Okay. I'm not going into the river works, the flood banks and things like that. I'm really talking about the drainage program here, because the drainage program, I think, is one, we haven't changed the rating scheme. It's an incredibly complex rating scheme. It's a complex level of services. And so I just thought I'd come back and say, why do we do this work? How do we prioritise at the moment? Tim's talked about what we'll probably try and do in the future, but basically, I may be teaching you how to suck eggs here. Most of you will know what I'm going to say, but it obviously supports productive land use and farming, maintains drainage and flood resilience. And I think it's really important that you recognise it's got those two functions. In low flow areas, it actually gives you that tile drainage outfall, and that's really important. In big, huge storm events, which we're going to get more of, it does give you that flood resilience. So we have to maintain it in both. Prevents blockages, erosion, vegetation build-up. In theory, that's what we're trying to do, protects infrastructure and communities. What are we doing? Settlement removal, remove channels clearing, spraying, controlling aquatic weeds, willow control and erosion control, protecting banks. We do have a year program up ahead of us, which I would say we do a program, it's normally finalised about October, November, and that will give, don't ask me why we do it a calendar year, just because it fits into our work programs. And so we're halfway through basically the 2026 program, and it's in someone, I'm not sure whether it's a spreadsheet or a large Word document, it's in one of those. So I don't have it in a map form, otherwise I would have put it up, but it is spread over a wide range. And that criteria looks at risks, looks at frequencies, and then the last 7 goes through is actual budget. And I think you probably all know of examples where we would like to clean a drain once every 3 years and we can't afford it, so we do it once every 8. And when we do once every 8, we obviously do a little bit more, becomes a little bit more significant in that area. And, I suppose a stitch in time saves 9 would be the ideal, but we've only got a certain amount of budget to do it. So the last sieve that we go through is really a budget sieve. Scale of the program works across multiple catchments, and those are a few examples, but it goes pretty much right across everywhere in the drainage. There are dozens and dozens of streams and drains and tributaries, and some of them, like our Catchment Liaison Committee, Waituna is a good example, is purely a drainage rate. There's no river rates go into that, as far as I know. So, some of the works that we're doing are quite significant in those catchments. Mix of planned and reactive works. Obviously, if things slip and whatever, we do reactive works. We would like to move more and more to planned works if we can afford it. Main season, January to April, yes, and then targeted September, December, ongoing intermittent programs. So there is kind of a period through the middle of winter that we don't really do a lot of drainage work. So next. We do prioritise, obviously, inspections. Pretty much most of the drainage network is inspected, or we actually get a call and we go and inspect on that. We do base it on historic programs, silt levels, things coming down and data, so that we do know some of that. Probably, I think someone raised the catchment plans. They probably aren't as detailed enough to actually feed into this program in a detailed way. We were, and Ella's going to talk a little bit about Tutaroa, and we had a meeting on that the other day and wondered whether we could get some of those catchment plans down into smaller catchments. Waituna might be a good example. That may help us inform some of that. And then we adjust to conditions and risks, obviously. If there are more events, Southland's large enough that, you could get an event that hits Western Southland but doesn't hit Eastern Southland, for example. And so that may change our priorities, particularly in that unplanned. Program is planned but adaptable. It needs to be, because we've got a limited amount of budget. Changes may occur due to conditions and events. Stakeholders notified of major timing changes. As I say, we have got a program that goes out there. We do notify landowners as they go through. Catchment liaison committees certainly have an interest in this program. Key takeaways: it's a large, ongoing regional program focused on keeping water moving and land drainage systems operating, balances planning and flexibility, supports economic and environmental outcomes. I would say that our program, the last of it goes through, is actually about to fit into the budget that we've got. I have got those sheets. I don't really think that it's ideal to talk about this drain or that drain, but they are run out to, I'm not quite sure, about 7 or 8 pages, I think, of the drainage program from here. That's from May out till December. I didn't actually ask them to print out what we've done so far to date. So the idea of what Tim's coming to is actually getting those in a more regimented and a more documented way so that we can actually do. I don't think we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but you may have some decisions on, can we afford the levels of service that we are delivering, or do we try and increase the budgets and whatever? Have we got the right drains? What is the network that we should be maintaining? We've got some cases where we're maintaining this piece at the lower end of the catchment. We're not maintaining the middle section, and then we're maintaining the top section, which seems a little strange to me. But that's true to the traditional way the thing was set up, and the people in that middle ratepayers weren't willing for us to apparently take over the responsibility of that drain. But I would say some of that is some of our poorer maintained drainage network, and it influenced the performance of our other networks or other parts of our network.
Just jump in just briefly through Chair. Just say there was as part of the LTP, one of the elements that we were intending to traverse in this first couple of years of it was to look at the drainage rating process and review how we do that, as we had already reviewed the river rating elements. The recommendation from staff, given that we are still wrangling with what the river works implementation is that we probably won't get to the drainage rating review this financial year. The questions that David has just spoken to in terms of how do we prioritise, what is it that you want us to be doing, should inform a conversation about how we pay, as opposed to figuring out how we pay for the thing and then trying to smush in how we prioritise. So the intention is to approach the drainage rating review slightly differently than the river works rating review, which is to say, what are our strategic intentions here? What is it that you want us to be prioritising? How should we do that? And then figure out how we pay for it, as opposed to doing it from the other way around. So it's still on the radar. That conversation that we just had before when Rob was here, long list of questions from a drainage rating change perspective that need to come back to you before we make any changes to how we operationalise that work programme. So what David outlined is how we do right now. There'll be more change probably in the next financial year that we'll need to bring back to you around what do you want for drainage, how do you want us to approach it, and then we figure out how we fund it and if there needs to be LTP changes to that.
Really quick, if Alistair, John, and Morris.
Through Chair, I just heard 8 years in cleaning a drain out. Well, as I understand it, and I saw some photographs of a drain that was cleaned at 8 years down in Waituna, and do we have an abatement? What actually happened? Because as soon as you start going that long, there is a fairly large amount of stuff to be removed.
I might jump in on that one before we get ourselves in bother, given that we're live streaming. So there is a live compliance investigation underway in relation to that incident. So we need to let that play its course. There's an internal review happening as well. But the substance of your question, which is how much material gets cleared out of a drain when you don't clear it for 8 years, is there would be more if you cleared it than if you cleared it at 3 years. So we need to be clear on what that is, but we also need to be making sure that we're doing things within the bounds of the rules as they currently are. So just, if you want to jump in, do. But
basically, our work is covered by a code of practice, and so whether that code of practice, I think, again, is an evolving document, needs to be of new experiences and new opportunities. So if you have a look, there's, that drain's been cleared for, help me here, someone, I hate to think how many years, but the big huge build-ups on the side are actually from multiple cleanings over multiple years. And so I think we need to look at our code of practice, get everyone to buy into our code of practice. Then if we find something new, and I do think in that case there were a few new things that we adopted into the code of practice, and we keep our practice going, so that we do, I think down there, we are supporting economic and environmental outcomes. There's no doubt that that's what we are trying to do, because the the environmental outcomes for the province are important as well. We want to be seen to be clean and green as well as be clean and green.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it touched on that line. I guess, what is our policy around innovation as far as what ticks the boxes, gets the job done, saves money, and has a way of having fun with balance on what we're trying to achieve? And what are what is our policy around providing contractors that support for that transition? Because we don't farm like we did 50 years ago, yet we clean drains out like we did still a bucket. So I think it'd be really interesting to know where the direction is around adaptation to new technologies that still achieve the outcomes everybody's looking for. So I think it's a really
I'll start, and Lucy can add in. We're certainly very committed to educating our staff right across, and we actually are very active in integrating with all the other catchment boards so that we follow it. We bring down subject matter experts quite often, and they'll go out for a few days. One of the things, again, in the Kanoa program, we are looking at developing our contractors and actually increasing their staff numbers, just so that it's better resource and better resilience through the Kanoa project. And we are using in the Kanoa project, trying to use the same contractors that we use for our maintenance work. So we are hoping that we will upskill them in the process as they go. And some of the things they come along with is basically upskilling us as well. So I do think we are committed to innovation. I'm not sure we're at the bleeding edge, but we are in some places at the leading edge of technology. We are, again, just exploring, shall I say, we are going to come probably as a capital program to buy a new drone that will give us the ability to fill in the LiDAR gaps that we've got, which would make it short-term pain because it'll cost you a bit, but in the long term it will enable us to be more adaptable and more responsive in that immediate request. Certainly looking at new technologies of how they're doing. I think drone technology is probably, from a spray point of view, we are looking at integrating also with our sort of biosecurity people that are using similar technologies. And so, there's kind of a number of things going, and I could sort of maybe get more things if I kind of went away and wrote a paper on it. But, yeah.
I think I'd just jump into, so there's a bit there around kind of regulatory. You asked about a policy question, like what's our policy, what's our approach? I think there's a regulatory approach that that sets your guardrails, right? Like that's what we have to do. I think the piece that Tim had talked about before in terms of the asset management policy, there's a policy direction space there that you need to be providing to us so that we know that within the bounds of the guardrails that the rules give us, that we've got opportunities for ourselves, but also for our contractors and our communities. So there is more conversation needed about this. And I would just, Totoku to David's point around where we have those opportunities that aren't restricted by the guardrails of rules or policies that's previously been given to us, that we are seeking opportunities for how we could be more efficient, more effective, and where we can make use of new tech. And leaning into the River Manager SIG is a really good way of doing that, because there's a lot of really cool innovation happening that we are tapping into across the country. So that's kind of short-term stuff. There's also all of the work that Ella and the Learning from Our Land project is going to give us opportunities to think about that longer term. What are the innovations that you want us to be pushing ahead with, and how do we do that in a more systemic way? So when we're looking at rule changes or policy shifts, that you've guided us there. So it's a bit of a horses for courses, short-term, medium, long-term, taking the opportunities where we can.
Thank you. I'll just further from what John has said, and Lucy has sort of answered this quite well, but I think one of the things that we need to recognise is that the cleaning or the excavation of these watercourses is a very destructive activity from an environmental point of view. It's very important for economic purposes because it maintains pastures in a drained state so that the grass can grow well, and we all know that stuff. But I don't see really anywhere where probably people do, and I apologise if I'm wrong here, but we do need to have it in the top of our minds that going through a stream with a digger and cleaning out the accumulated sediment and weeds is very destructive to the things that are living in that stream. And I know we do it every year, and they build up in that. But I think that from what John was saying, if we can think further into the future, and let's see ways that we can stop the sediment, which is the big thing that we clean out, or reduce the sediment, reduce the weed growth in there by various techniques. So we can reduce the sediment that flows in by managing our winter grazing pastures better, and all that other stuff that you were talking about, Lucy. But I don't see this recognition that it's really important for us to try and improve what we've been doing for the last 50 years needs to change. And Dave, you've said that, so I accept that as well. I think that's really important for us to always be thinking about ways that we can reduce this activity. It's cheaper for farmers; they don't have to do it so often. The drainage is maintained. Biodiversity is enhanced, if we have more wetlands and that sort of thing. So all of that stuff helps in the longer term.
I think I'd just add and round back to Councillor Morrison's point as well. The need for us to integrate our thinking, not just catchment stretches, but actually across different outcomes we're seeking, is a really important transition for the organisation. And I think that we're on the cusp of it, and you've given us good direction of what you want us to be doing in terms of what that looks like, but there's more to come, and it's going to happen really quickly, because to David's point, we can't actually hang around. We need to be making these moves really speedily. So you're flagging really good points, and we're really aware that we need to be taking care, and that it's an evolution of our processes in terms of how we do things. Yeah.
I think part of it also is everyone doing that work. We are trying to educate them and so that they know what the economic and environmental outcomes are, and so we are adapting practice and that kind of thing. All of catchment approach obviously is the only way we're going to control sediment, and we're also going to get, with climate change, more and more events. So there are times where we have to do it. So destructive, I think, immediately potentially, but it's actually quite interesting, we did have someone from a Catchment Liaison Committee talk about the recovery and how quick the recovery was after it. And if you go and have a look, it looks quite horrific maybe on the day they've done it, but go back a fortnight later and you've got a totally different looking stream. So, yeah.
Chair, but just to answer Alistair's question, we've got a fairly limited budget on the Waikiwi, so we weren't. We had sort of promoted getting over the years more and more budget, but it wasn't readily accepted.
Thanks, BC. No, that's good.
No, I was just mentioning why it was an 8-year turnaround, sorry.
Yeah.
And just to answer Councillor Rodway's ingenuity, I think Catchment operations have been really proactive, and I'm quite happy to show you the bank stabilisation work that we've done down there. And just on that Waikiwi example, the eroding banks were recognised as being the biggest problem down there, and we've looked at that. We've brought a community with us. We've got a bank stabilisation rate. We've done a whole lot of good work. The community have actually put their own money up big time for that work. So I actually think we're doing a really good job there. There's more work to be done, establishing natural meanders, all that kind of thing. But we've made a good start, and we think that will likely result in less drain cleaning, less, so you're not cleaning the whole section, you just might be picking up inside being deposition zones. So, we've really been proactive in that. I'd just like to point that out.
Thanks, DC.
Yeah, just ahead, just from a personal experience, not cleaning drains that, otherwise we've got a large drain, but we had an adverse event, I should say. 50 mils of rain in about 20 minutes. That drain got naturally cleaned out, wiped out all my fences, wiped out, it all ended up on the main road. Like it was one that hadn't been cleaned out for 8 years. Mother Nature came along and cleaned it out for me and made a hell of a mess. And probably given me I thought I was doing a good job, I was catching the sediment, I was using it as like a sediment trim for a number of farms. So they've probably given me a bit of a different feel. I might have probably clean it out a bit more often, because the effects when it went wrong, it went horribly wrong. Luckily it was only localised, a couple of farms. But I just wanted to say that we do now see these issues down here in regards to that. But we need to keep moving.
Yes, thank you. Yeah,
thanks, David, for that.
Head into the Learning from the Land program update that Ella's going to run us through, just to let you know what we've been doing in this space for the last wee while. And much like some of the other conversations we've had this morning, there'll be a formal report coming through to the Integrated Management Committee that's due at the end of May to give a formal update of where we're at with this program. So I understand as well that there's a finance and performance stream of work that's associated with this. So Patrick and I have been talking about how we make sure that we're giving you a consolidated briefing so that you understand our workshop that I presented on the topic and the impact of it. So there's some strategy and some integrated catchment pieces, but there's also that finance piece.
Thanks for that.
I'll just need to
Could you not those ones, so share that one. Take all of the maps and pass them on. We should have a FMU map and a Tetavel map.
Yeah, don't let anybody have it. Share it.
Ella said she only needed 15 minutes to do an update, so we should be on time.
Sorry.
Now I know. I'll make sure there's more.
Colour ones too. Right.
Good morning, everyone. Morena. As Lucy said, this is an exciting piece of land that's been sort of brewing away in the background for a while now. I hope to be able to present a fuller update to you soon, but this is sort of where we've landed to date and the general progress. And we will have some larger kind of catchment decision-making aspects that we need to bring to you in the future. That's not for today. So yes, definitely this is a piece of work across the organisation, tying in with the work that strategy is doing, long-term plan, our property team and our finance team. So really important that it's understood from across the organisation, and whatever options that we give to you have good across organisation analysis from an economic, social and environmental lens. This is a living lab. It is a way of hopefully using this innovation that we've been talking about this morning to have better informed decisions into the future. There is some low-hanging fruit that we hope some of this information could be taken up quite quickly, but also some of it's going to be about the long-term decision-making that we need to better inform asset management plans and our wider catchment plans into the future. We need to be building capability and capacity within the organisation, understanding the information and data we have and what we're missing, and then the tools that we can use to take what is actually a very complex sort of interaction across the systems that we're referring to, and bring them into a space where we can use it for decision making. So it's not to say that we're going to simplify this stuff, because it cannot be simplified. It needs to be understood in its complexity. However, it also needs to be usable. So that's our job to do. We, as I mentioned, will need to be clear about the approach that we want to take around things like governance and the scope that we want to take for these projects, and also how we want to engage and bring the community along. So those are key aspects that we're yet to delve into for this particular pilot. So just bear with me, we're getting there. So one of the handouts that I gave, I only grabbed a couple of copies because you should already have seen this. It's the leasehold land policy from 2022. So this is a piece of work that's built up. I found documents going back to 2005 referring to this particular policy. And over time it's changed and merged, but really what I wanted to highlight, you know, the leasehold land has always been about flood management, and the policy highlights that the primary purpose for this land is because it was too expensive to protect from flooding. And so we purchased it, well, the Catchment board purchased it with the community, and we've inherited it. So it's community owned land, and it's primarily around flood management. Next up, in terms of the objectives from that policy, it's really clear there are, aspirations around environmental outcomes, around social outcomes and economic outcomes. So we've said that we are striving towards environmental sustainability, whatever we decide that to mean. We are going to achieve, be working in a space of good management to reduce contaminant loss, and we are going to protect and enhance. So that definitely means there is no reduction in the ecological health of or at least the biodiversity health of this land. Socially, it's about community benefit, and that's community broadly, in my mind. Professional operation and a good landlord, and also acknowledging those lessees that are doing a really good job. It doesn't really lend to what we do when lessees are not doing a great job. Then it says that we're going to maximise operating surplus to be used within the catchment, so that's really important. And some of the roles that we've got there and overlapping with the catchment liaison committees, and it will fund approved work within that catchment. And that there's a whole lot of stuff in there around insurance management and that sort of thing. What the challenge is when it comes to trying to use this particular policy in terms of both long-term decision-making and operational decisions is it all just says all of these things are important, and henceforth go out and try to figure out how we're going to make the decisions using that information. So some of the conversation and korero from the previous two presenters, it was very much some of these values are not aligned, and we're not clear about how we make those decisions, when and why. And so an opportunity here with the Learning from the Land program is to start to really delve into, well, what does that actually mean in a safe space, because it's our own land. We have full control of what we do on this. Yes, there are external, influences in it, but ultimately it's our responsibility to manage this community-owned land in a good way. So the Learning from the Land program is about establishing a long-term decision-making system for Environment Southwest land holdings. It is designed to support confident, consistent and enduring land use decisions. And the program aims to enhance and protect catchment outcomes over time and remain robust to changes in policy, political direction, funding cycles and environmental conditions. And I'd probably add there, as in recent learnings, other external drivers of change that we might be seeing globally, like changes in the price of fuel. So what happens if we are having to reduce the amount of drains we clean by X amount because of restrictions on fuel use? So if we have no decision-making criteria set up, we have no way of prioritising those drains and therefore understanding which ones are critical to maintaining the health of our critical infrastructure as opposed to ones that are maintaining the health of private property. So it is a living lab to also test our integrated catchment management framework. This is really important. So it is about having a catchment context. We learned a lot through Waikiwi Slow the Flow around how we understand our catchment beyond just freshwater and across the other areas of the organisation and values to the community, including social, cultural and economic. So these are just examples of the types of indicators that we might be using as part of the way of better understanding a catchment-wide approach to this work. So we're taking an integrated catchment lens, we're applying it to the Learning from the Land program, and then we want some projects to be able to test this program of works. The ICM framework will inform that, along with actually, so there's the place-based understanding of ICM and the indicators. Then there's also actually how we implement it. So how, as an organisation, we're going to work across teams and divisions to be able to achieve this work. And it's been brewing away for a long time. This is a really great opportunity for us to really make some progress in that space. We need transformation across the organisation if we're going to achieve that. It's a very different way to operate into how we operate now. Beyond just the ICM group, as I mentioned, financial, science, strategy, they all need to be on board. The land sustainability team, obviously, as well. So in terms of learning from the land, we've been very clear about the need for a very defined process to work from. So what is the problem that we're trying to solve? And so investment logic mapping has been a really great tool to help us better understand that. It's nationally used, it's used by Treasury, it's a well-known framework. So we wanted to use something that hopefully we could continue to replicate and kind of use over and over again through this process. Identifying success criteria about both what the problem is, but also where we want to be and how we're going to move in that direction. And finally, at the project level, as I mentioned, we want to be able to test those tools and approaches, different ways of working. Ultimately, as has been asked by the investment committee, we need to start understanding how we make decisions about the future lease land at a parcel level, because we're just rolling over the new leases and we don't necessarily have a decision-making framework to make sure that we're either getting the best return on investment and or ensuring that actually how that land's being used is the right way for the future of those catchments. So we're already through to phase 3 of this work. The first 2, as I said, was really important about setting up what we call the architecture of the sort of approach. What is ICM? How are we going to do it? How do we manage these sorts of programs and how do we prioritise certain aspects of the catchment? So here today, I just want to mention the project. So the Tiraroa catchment has been highlighted as the project for us to progress. So the Tiraroa catchment is obviously in the Matoda FMU. So we need to we want to take the widest possible context to begin with. And then the Tiraroa catchment from there. So all of the leased land that we own in the Lower Matoda is within the Tiraroa catchment. So it gives it a really good opportunity for us to understand that. But we need to be aware that obviously there's a lot of land above it. There's also the community of Waimahaka. Amy missed me. And what's also really helpful in this catchment, obviously it's our lease land, but we've got a lot of assets in this catchment. So the drainage system and of course the Te Reo floodgates. So it will massively help our future asset management plans if we can start putting together some options for what we want to do with that land into the future and the assets. So what we're going to be using is a top-down and bottom-up approach. I promised that I wrote this before you brought it up, Mr. Morrison and Ludlow. So yes, the current, as we kind of do for the freshwater farm plans, we ask landowners to consider a CCVC. It is not fit for purpose for a catchment plan. It only considers freshwater. We want to go much wider than that. We've got a better understanding, particularly around flooding and the role of our river management and drainage in the catchment, and that's not necessarily considered, but it's not considered by CCVC. It also doesn't consider things like biodiversity, biosecurity issues, and then of course we want to overlay it with the context of the fact that we actually own this land, and there are organisational considerations that we also need to get. So we want to be able to dig right down to that property scale and say, okay, so what does this mean in the context of the FMU, in the Te Reo catchment, and down to each parcel, and therefore informing the future leases. So this is an example. It is from the Lower Matoda, but I haven't given you an exact position of where this is. So this is a very quick run through of essentially the data that we've got currently. There's a lot more information that we need, well, not a lot actually. We're going to see how much we can do with what we've got. And then gather some additional. So just for the ecological kind of component of that ICM approach, this is the sort of information we've already got. So you can see, you know, there's a certain amount of mapping that we understand around what's a wetland within our leased land, where there's peak areas, and then sort of what's the flood potential. So this is our flood mapping from 2020, you can see what's kind of covered. But what we don't have at the moment is like a hydrological map of where that water's coming from through the catchment, and you know what's influencing that. And so the opportunity to potentially start looking at things like slow the flow. The only way we would be able to achieve that in the upper catchment is obviously working with landowners. So there's a whole component there around what we need to do to achieve that. Also the climate change data we need to better understand. That hasn't been overlaid into this catchment. Through the Te Reo floodgate consent, there was some good information around sort of sea level rise and what's going to happen in terms of ongoing salination of this land. But this is probably the key area where additional data and information would be really helpful. Exactly what the roles are of that drainage network, and where it's ensuring that it's providing outflow from other private land compared to our own land and all that kind of thing, so we can get a good understanding of that. Potentially that would be able to then inform things like level of service and the drainage and river management policies for the future. So again, it's helping us to be able to dig deeper and get a better insight. So the sort of thing that we do get through the freshwater farm plan process is an understanding of physiographics. So Environment Southland hasn't really played with the types of information that the catchment groups, for example, are receiving through with Thriving Southland support. So some of the catchment work that's happening out there on the field, we can start using that to help inform our own land within Environment Southland, which is pretty exciting. There's some cool innovative kind of ways of being able to, at a sort of sub-catchment scale, start looking at where those interventions might be. So, obviously, making sure that we're really aware where the high value areas are, and some of these may in fact we may need to move away from farming some of those lands. Yep.
When you use value in that context, value
ecological
value, as opposed to farm production value.
No, these are high ecological value. So in terms of farm systems data, yep, that would be incredibly helpful, and we get to that in just a second. So fish passage remediation. So finally, there's obviously other organisational considerations that we talked about. So some of these leases have rolled over and some of them are coming up for renewal, and we're going to need to be very careful of ensuring that we're good lessees or landowners, and that we're working alongside with the lessees. So conversations are actually being opened up with a lot of these lessees again, because the Freshwater Farm Plan team is working with them. So we're already going in and talking about their farm systems. We need to be really clear that actually anything that comes out of the action list, Environment Southland is also required to be part of. And so where there's been any highlighting any need for infrastructure upgrades, we need to be able to quite quickly sort of come up with a plan. And I think that also really helps us inform, our sort of cost benefit analysis for, whether we want to continue to farm this land, farm it in a particular way, or whether or not there's other uses for that land. So we're starting to build a much healthier picture for each of these leasehold pieces. And the other key thing is the Freshwater Farm Plan process doesn't necessarily look at everything we might want to look at. So an example given to me the other day was the Freshwater Farm Plan's recommending that one of the landfills that are on ES property are too close to a waterway, and the recommendation is that the landfill should be moved. As a landowner, do we want landfills on our land? And so that's beyond the scope of the Freshwater Farm Plan, and we need to start having conversations of what we actually want this to look like into the future. And obviously the Tiroa tidal gates are a key component of this. They've been around for a very long time and are very much a part of the community in the catchment context. They are about halfway through their natural life, but the consent's going to lapse in 2029 at this stage. And we do need to have some options about what that might look like in the future. And so, what are all the possible options, and then to shortlist them and have a really healthy conversation about that with the community prior to the consent, ideally. And so that we can go in with, full confidence that we understand the implications in terms of the long-term costs and the long-term implications across our social, environmental, and economic spaces. So we're asking a lot of this little project, but I have confidence that collectively across this organisation we have some very talented people who can help us achieve these outcomes in terms of testing and informing our long-term decision making around our land holdings. Also giving us a more insight into how we achieve these catchment outcomes. So comparing where we're at now to where we want to be in the future, and starting to also grip that up. Is that how order? Do we continue to question that, or do we take that as an assumption and actually make progress to figuring out how we ensure we're tracking in that direction? So next steps, we will come back to you with a paper on the subject, but very much a top-down, bottom-up decision-making approach to the specific land parcels within the catchment context. So an organisational project plan and some field trips, taking teams across the organisation out to the space. We were just talking to the Riverworks team in terms of the drainage work and having a conversation about that on site. And an engagement plan, how are we going to start working alongside the lessees and the wider catchment, and then being able to prioritise those leases across the next 12 months. That was slightly more than 20 minutes. Yeah. And importantly, back to the previous conversation, a catchment approach will then be able to, well, not then, alongside also starting to build the code blueprint.
Yeah, thanks. So, how are the landowners that are going to that area going to be affected, etc., as you do this? And secondly, how much land is involved and how much land have we got? And did I hear right that you can have them all come due at the same time? Because obviously if they've signed in for X amount of years, then do that.
Yeah, so the maps that I showed you, you can see there's a line outlining the Kanoa catchment. You can see the piece of the, you know, the red is what Environment Southland owns. So it's, you know, it is a slither across the bottom, but it's the receiving environment.
There's a
right?
couple of green ones in there that'll be privately owned though, so.
Yeah, so part of the engagement plan will definitely be understanding that, and there is some there's some more understanding of exactly the role of our land in that context as well. But this is still yet to be sorted out. We're very aware of needing to make sure that we're working closely, or working alongside those landowners and the lessees.
Just to be real clear through you, Chair, we haven't made any decision to advance this at pace yet. We're not
No.
it's not moving beyond today
Right.
without another actual conversation and a decision point from yourselves that you want us to do a thing. This is where we've gotten to right now. So the conversations haven't started with the people in the community and the landowners in a deliberate way yet, because we haven't sought your direction on where to next with it.
So it's the top down, bottom up thing, the theoretical discussion over where it could go.
Yes. Yes, precisely. Yeah.
How much land's involved?
In terms of what we own.
The area?
I don't have that number.
There's 2,500 hectares in the bottom of the photo, and all of it's in the Tenth Island.
Okay, so 2,500 hectares.
I don't know the full, I'll need to get the number of the entire catchment, but
John, you're in the way.
I've got a speaking point too, so.
You don't have no questions.
No, I'm comfortable on this. It's really good to hear that we've got the farm plan stuff going, so we understand the nutrient. I think it's really important we understand their systems and the nutrient loading, and whatever decisions we make, how might that better, how can that work? Because to those point, we want to make sure that you manage your way through this. You know, because I think it's really good the approach we're taking with the tenants. I think it's really important.
Paul.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Thank you, Chief. Exactly what David's saying is good to know or understand the neighbours and what they're doing, because I'm just looking at maps on my phone, I can see some of the parts that are not owned by DDs. You can see some action on those blocks of land, whether they're privately owned, what they're doing with them. They could be doing some really good work that we're working with. We would come up with as well, whether it's administered land or whatever. There's also a large block there that there could be a lot of work being done on it at the moment. It might affect everything around it, you know, so it'll be good to have an understanding of everything around it. So a lot of work in the future, I can imagine. You can only pick up so much from Google Earth. Quite interesting when you're looking here with this map. See, there are some actions happening on that.
I think as well, just to point, like the focus for the learning from the land was to make sure that we are looking at pieces that are kind of not quick wins is probably not the right phrase, but we've got more opportunity to do stuff with our land than we would have for liaising with private owners. But this gives you an indication of what our intention is in terms of how broad we could go or how narrow. And so when we come back to you with a decision point, we'll be asking for your guidance on how far do you want it to go? Because this has been one of the programs we've been talking about for quite some time that we haven't been able to nail to the ground. And part of the reason why we haven't has been because the scope kind of ebbs and flows and how big or how small. So we have to get real nuggety about what it is you want us to do in the first instance with our land and how else we could engage with other people who might buff it up against this is one of those questions.
Al?
Have we got a modern lease going into these leased pieces of land when it comes up for renewal?
so I'm aware of your concern about that and have been working closely with Patrick around preparing for the investment committee workshop which is coming up. That level of detail is part of this program to inform. It does sit slightly to one side. Yeah, it's definitely in the hands of Patrick.
And pray tell me, take a line from Glenham to Radine and slightly off away, there's a wee red patch. Do we have a lease up there?
We spot there.
Yeah.
Obviously we do. And we
Have a
got
look at
outside
that particular
catchment.
piece. I will, is it actually?
round four, so.
Yes,
And
thanks,
that-
Roger.
yeah, It is outside the gate, but do we have one?
Look, we have got some very random bits of land around the place and not all of them are from the same time period as the, from the floodplain and the bottom. I'd have to go on and have a look at it specifically.
So again, the point around it's a cross-organisational project, Ella and part of my team obviously, but leading on it in order to kind of wrangle all the other parts of the business that I've got some skin in this game. So one of them is Patrick's team, but also Sam's team have got Keith works on behalf of in Sam's team to help with some of this leasing pieces, and we've already talked about the farm plan. So yeah, trying to piece all of these bits together is part of the ongoing opportunity.
Right, Phil.
Thank you. Just wanted to point out, because not everyone will know the history of this one, but when the regional forum was meeting, we pointed out to the council at the time that we are going to be asking landowners to make significant changes in some instances to how they use their land, and pointed out there's a moral obligation for the council to not be hypocrites and say you must change land use and then not be prepared to consider our own obligations around that. So this was initially that sharing that observation from the regional forum to the council at the time led to the project which was initially called Leading on Our Land, which was to have this, demonstrate that we ourselves are prepared to consider appropriate changes based on the context of the catchment needs. And it's nice to see that it's morphed to learning from the land, which is kind of cool, but it also reflects, I think, the fact that to lead, you need to be prepared to learn and share, and also role model, but also to provide pathways that others might follow. So I know that this is unique land and that it's a key purpose. It is flood management as opposed to food production. That might be the priority in other areas. But what would be kind of cool is if somehow we could, in due course, provide a pathway that others could follow, saying when the time comes for you to consider your land changes on your land targeted to the catchment context, here's a set of steps you might follow. Because we've trod this ground before, we've trod this path before, we've learnt that it's not easy. Here's this process you can step through to guide your own thinking. And it may be a more simplified version that can be adopted by a family-owned farm, for example.
Right, Roger.
Thanks, Chair.
I got it. She's just like waving.
Yes. My list. Yeah. Got the letters right this time. I don't know where I am.
Thanks, Ella, for introducing us to this. It's a fascinating catchment to work in. There was a couple of things that I wanted to touch on. One, the Titiroa catchment as it's defined here is I have no doubt correct, but I understand that there's a diversion midway through the catchment, and that medium to high flows are sort of routed directly into the Matilda, not the down through the Titiroa floodgates. So that's sort of an interesting and unique facet of this catchment's drainage network, which brings me to my second point, which is a bit of a frustration to see the differentiation between rivers and creeks and the drainage network, because they're all part of the drainage network, represented here on paper as a digital river network or digital drainage network, all having ecological values, to Morris's point earlier, with the distinction being that there's some regular rated maintenance work that's occurring in the area highlighted as yellow. I am interested to understand the floodplain that's illustrated here, and I think you commented that it doesn't reflect perhaps recent modelling. But I'm interested to understand how this one has been delineated, and subsequently, when we might anticipate seeing, revised floodplains that reflect the climate change projection work that we've seen. And then to Phil's point around the differentiation between this being held by the council for flood protection purposes in contrast to other land having food production purposes, I wonder whether there are in fact opportunities for food production systems to be incorporated into this land that rely on water, maybe more aquatic based food sources. And then finally, I just reflecting on this and some of our previous conversation, occurs to me that we are at times we're sort of thinking about how we manage outcomes from lots of water and its movement across our landscape. And conceptually, we have sort of three options, I believe. One is managing things at the source and limiting their movement from the landscape. Two is sort of applying some interception approach somewhere along it, and three is managing it in the receiving environment. And in the context of our thinking and going forward about council policy, I think it's really important that we're very clear about which of those we have a preference for, and that needs to be informed by understanding the costs associated with them, as well as ongoing commitments to them, depending on which one we choose. That's me.
Lyndall.
Thank you.
Lyndall Morris, thank you.
Just a very quick question. I'm assuming that we need to revisit perhaps the policy. And so I request that we flag that in strategic policy work program ahead, but none of us forget. So if you can work with Hayley on that, we see that.
Morris.
Yes, a bit of that, Mr. Chair. And also what Roger says about thinking about ways he might be able to earn some money off this land and keep it in its existing state as a, as a biodiverse area, and also in some places still be okay for farming. Is that, this area would possibly be, you'd have to do an economic case for it and see what people thought, possibly be quite good for electricity generation from wind farms, from wind turbines. It's possible. South have identified this area as being good for that. So I think for the policy that Lyndall's talking about, one of the things I think we should consider is whether or not we should, look at other activities that would occur on this land that was consistent with its original intent and its existing intent. So that we don't be linking between thinking that, well, we'll either allow farming to continue, or we've got to, set it aside as a wetland or something. We do need to make some money off this property. We could sell it, or we could do some productive things on it.
Mark?
I know it's too much perceptive, don't you?
No, I won't comment at the end. Yeah.
It's a good starting point, Ella. Obviously, there's quite a bit of work to I look forward to giving the next presentation.
Right. Obviously I've been through all the lease land and spent a lot of time down there, and I understand that. I've seen what floods do, seen all the damage the 2020 floods did to it and things like that. I understand we're going to change, but we've been leading on this land. When we turned up here in 2016, I remember having a conversation with the old councillors when we were telling Southland Water Land Plan came out, and they were saying, hey, stop what you're doing. I said, I didn't even know we owned 1 hectare of lease land when I turned up here. Now, there was basically no governance oversight on that land. I'm being quite blunt. That from day one, I said, stop. When I started talking to the farmers, that we were draining that land, the amount of drainage that I'm talking about, notified, like as in artificial drainage being put in, was phenomenal. We were intensifying our leased land, allowing the system to work like that, spending huge amounts of money, no return. And we were telling the rest of the province, stop, intensify it. I explained that. I remember talking to Morris there one day about that. Fencing and drainage. That stopped in 2016. I said 2017, around there. I said, this is serious issues. Especially when we were telling the rest of the province to stop what they're doing, because effectively that's what the Water and Land Plan was notified. So we have been leading on our land that we can't do what we're telling people they're not allowed to do. So the amount of work that we did and that we stopped doing we certainly was leading, showing in that aspect. This is actually, and we actually started saying we need to get a financial return. I look at this and I mean, I know, and there's a balance. There's a balance so that we need to get a return out of there. It's 450,000 a year getting paid for the shovel ready projects, paying off our loan of 4.5 million over 10 years. That will pay the community's input. Well, the loan actually borrowed a bit more, but that was the idea. That was about utilising these bits of land. So when we're talking about doing this, I understand we want to do stuff. I believe we have been leading because we've dropped land out. We have stopped severe intensification of that land. So, and it's actually putting money back into the community. So from my perspective in regards, and that's why we put this policy together. I mean, we spent a huge amount of time on that lease land policy, and don't underestimate how even getting that to where it was, and even dealing with leases. You know, we did spend a lot of time working with the lessees too, and that's probably the point I'm going to make at the end, to get where we have to work out where we can use these surplus funds. So we shut this down, someone else is going to be paying. So I'm just trying to say we need to get a return some way, and I think the first year, you know, we're getting like 600,000-700,000 a year now out of lease land. We were getting 60 or 70 10 years ago. Same financial. So I'm just saying it is contributing to a lot of stuff getting done into our community, and that's really important to me. One thing I would say that the relationships with the lessees is critical to work with lessees, and I ended up doing that job. Staff said, you go and talk to them. Because it's about turning up at the farm, having a yarn saying, we're going to change your leases. And I spent a lot of time on phones. This is again the same situation. If we're going to change, I'm just saying there's people probably around this council table can make that work better than our understanding. And I know just make sure that there's that connection and keeping the communications open is critical in this discussion. So I just put that's my point of view. I've spent a huge amount of time on it. But I know we have to change things. But you've got to know a bit of the history of this. That's not that. I can tell you how much money we spent and how many there's a drain on every 30 metres across 400 hectares. Yeah, 200 kilometres of an overflow he put in. And from here to Mosburn, he said, and we paid for that. And there was never going to be a return out of it. So we made some really silly decisions way back. Anyway, that's me. I say. Oh, I am. Because it's really. But you've got to have that knowledge. You've got to have there's a lot to it, how we got to where we have tonight.
So there's, to your point, Jeremy, there's loss return. There's actually the net return's not that flash.
No.
So there's still a lot of capital expenditure going into those. You know, we need to actually look at that with eyes open.
I'll challenge the budgets now. I don't know why we put a 25%. I wanted to probably 15-20%, but we're still spending 24.9%. And I'm going, you don't need to, you know, we're meant to have. There was meant to be when we did this work. I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit annoyed here. We were meant to have management of how we do our work with our assets within there. We were meant to have our ceilings on the lease land reserves, how much we can use. And that's why I'm always saying we need to use this money for the community. We've got $7 million sitting there in lease land reserves. And we have got things to use it, but we've got to use it. But it's good assets to use that. It does a lot of work for the community. So anything else, sorry.
Leases do not have a percentage that you spend on capital. It's a day-by-day, request by request basis. And that's why I've been gnashing my gums here for 3 years and a bit more to try and get a modern lease in place so that it is done commercially. But nothing seems to happen.
Yeah.
I think what you are all traversing in this last little part of the conversation is one of the main reasons why we need Patrick and the Finance and Performance committee and us from an operational delivery perspective to be aligned on this. So the work that Ella's talking about, specific, operational focused, can't be done in isolation from the finance and the capital and the leases and the other considerations and all the history that you talked about, Chairman. So I think the next conversation that we're planning for is a joint one with myself and Patrick supporting yourself, and with Ella and the team feeding into that, so that you get, as you say, full eyes open to Councillor Matheson's point in terms of costs, but also what is it that you're directing us to do.
Yeah, just quickly, Lucy, I agree with that totally. You could vacate the land completely and go, we're just going to do all sorts of projects down there, and then find that actually farmers on the land were helping to control weeds and giving you a return that you don't get. So there's definitely a big balancing act. And if we go too hard on this, they'll walk away because they do get flooded out, and then there's a huge cost to their business when they hit. So it's very much a balancing act.
Yep, we'll wrap it up anyway. I forget things.
Thanks, Ella.
Yeah, thanks, Ella.
Thank you all for your thought and your contributions today. So I have a whole bunch of actions on my list of things that come from today, which is good. Like, we have to make sure that we are taking conversations from workshops through to decision points or further discussion. So just so I am clear and you're clear of some of those that are on my list, and I might not have got them all, but reports to on the Kanoa progress will go through to the ICMC committee. That'll include
Everybody listen, please.
project milestones, budget, including rationales, and a conversation that I will take up with both Amy and Patrick about reports that they might need for their committees to I love those point around deliberate decision around trigger points in regards to risk. I will, through the wonderful Tim, ask West Coast Joe to come and present to the next Integrated Catchment Management Committee at the end of May to talk about bathymetric LiDAR, so that you get a induction similar to what we did for the asset management one at the last meeting. We will be bringing back a paper on the rating review implementation and making reference to the specific decisions that you made through the LTP, and not relitigating, but actually talking about what outstanding questions are still remaining in order to operationalise those decisions. We will bring the asset management policy through to the next committee round. I had a little chat with both Councillor Pemberton and Councillor Ludlow and with Hayley about how we might do that in an effective way, being that it's a new policy. It should come through to the Strategy and Policy Committee. So Councillor Pemberton's had to go, but he was happy that we slot in a little S&P section on the same day as we've currently got the Integrated Catchment Management Committee scheduled, so we're not slowing anything down. So between Councillor Ludlow and Councillor Pemberton, they'll chair that session, and we will talk about the asset management policy in that space, hopefully in corridor. And then if the asset management policy is adopted by yourselves, we will then report on its progress through to the ICM committee in an ongoing way. The other part we talked about was obviously just now the learning from our land stuff. So again, a paper to come to ICMC and another workshop with Patrick and myself to talk about full eyes open in the work programme ahead of us. There were more things too that I need to do.
On that last point, can we ensure that the recent climate change update report is made over this learning on that land thinking? Don't understand why 2050 is this lease land even going to be viable as farming.
Thank you all very much indeed for your
Thanks, guys.
I will not lie.